There are places where the ground refuses to stay still. The southern boundary of Gifford Pinchot National Forest runs for 43 miles along the Washington-Oregon border, cutting through dense stands of Douglas fir and western hemlock that have stood for centuries. The forest itself was established in 1908, named after the first chief of the United States Forest Service, a man who believed wilderness could be measured, mapped, and managed with precision. For decades, that precision held. Then, in the spring of 1947, something began to move. The boundary stones themselves are unremarkable. Concrete markers, each weighing roughly 80 pounds, stamped with brass plates identifying their survey coordinates. They were placed at quarter-mile intervals by a team of federal surveyors in 1932, part of a nationwide effort to formalize public land boundaries during the Depression. The work was meticulous. Records show that each stone was set into bedrock or compacted soil at least 18 inches deep, anchored to resist frost heave and erosion. The terrain along the southern boundary is rugged but not impassable. It follows a natural ridgeline through mixed forest, occasionally dipping into ravine oise carved by seasonal creeks. The soil is volcanic in origin, stable, well-draining, and geologically inactive. There are no fault lines nearby, no underground rivers, no caves or sinkholes. Nothing in the topography suggests instability. Yet the stones move. The first documented displacement occurred in May of 1947. A Forest Service ranger named Gerald Pittman was conducting a routine boundary inspection when he noticed that Marker 17, located near the Trout Lake Access Road, had shifted from its recorded position. Pittman assumed vandalism. He filed a brief report noting the stone had been disturbed and requested a replacement. The new marker was installed in June. By September, it had moved again. This time, Pittman measured the displacement carefully. 11 feet, northwest, exactly. Over the following months, additional stones began to shift. Not all of them, only those in a 12-mile section between markers 14 and 31. Each moved the same distance, in the same direction, always northwest. The pattern was so consistent that by 1948, Pittman stopped attributing it to vandalism. His reports grew more detailed, more cautious. In one memo to his supervisor, he wrote, "The stones are not being pushed. They are not being pulled. They are simply appearing 11 feet from where they were placed." No explanation was offered. The stones were replaced again. By 1952, the Forest Service had replaced the boundary markers in that section 6 times. Each time, within weeks or months, they moved. Always 11 feet. Always northwest. Rangers began to avoid the area. Maintenance requests went unanswered. In 1956, a junior surveyor named Alice Kowalski was assigned to investigate. She spent 3 weeks camping along the boundary line, taking daily measurements with a theodolite and comparing them against the original survey maps from 1932. Her report was never made public, but a retired Forest Service archivist named Raymond Holt later described its contents in a 1998 interview with a regional history journal. According to Holt, Kowalski documented 17 separate displacements over the course of her survey. She noted that the stones moved only at night. She noted that the ground around each marker showed no signs of disturbance, no tool marks, no footprints, no soil compression. Most troubling, she noted that on 3 separate occasions she observed fresh survey stakes she had planted in the morning lying 11 feet northwest of their original positions by the following dawn. Kowalski's final entry, according to Holt, included a single, handwritten line: "Recommend discontinuation of replacement efforts pending geological review." No geological review was ever conducted. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, the displaced stones were left in place. Rangers occasionally checked on them, but no formal monitoring was established. Local hikers began to notice. A 1974 article in the Trout Lake Community Newsletter mentioned the wandering boundary markers as a curiosity, though the author treated it lightly, suggesting frost heave or settling soil as explanations. A follow-up letter to the editor, signed only as J.R., noted that frost heave does not move objects in straight lines over such distances. In 1981, the Forest Service made one final attempt to address the anomaly. A contracted surveying firm from Portland was hired to reestablish the boundary using modern GPS equipment. The team, led by a surveyor named Marcus Delgado, spent 2 weeks mapping the southern section. Delgado's official report stated that the displaced stones were consistent with historical records and recommended that new markers be installed at the corrected coordinates. The new stones were placed in October of 1981. By March of 1982, all 17 had moved 11 feet northwest. Delgado was interviewed in 2006 by a graduate student researching anomalous land surveys in the Pacific Northwest. He described the project as routine, but admitted that certain details had unsettled him. "We set the stones in concrete," he said, "poured footings, rebar anchors, the works. When I came back to check on them the following spring, they were gone, not damaged, not tipped over, just gone. And 11 feet away, there they were, sitting upright in undisturbed ground, like they'd been there the whole time." When asked if he had any theories, Delgado paused for a long time before answering. "No," he said, "I don't." In 1983, the Forest Service quietly ceased all efforts to replace or relocate the boundary markers in the affected section. Internal memos from that period, obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request in 2012, reveal minimal discussion. One memo, dated August 1983, reads, "Boundary maintenance suspended indefinitely. Existing markers remain in place. No public comment necessary." The phrase, "no public comment necessary," appear in 3 separate documents from that year. Local witnesses offer little clarity. A retired fire lookout named Donna Kelleher, who worked in the forest from 1976 to 1994, recalled hearing about the stones from older rangers. "They didn't like to talk about it," she said in a 2009 oral history interview. But everyone knew. You'd see the markers out there, and you'd know they weren't where they were supposed to be. Some of the guys said it was magnetic. Some said it was the trees growing and pushing them. But trees don't push things in straight lines. Kelleher also mentioned a detail that appears nowhere in official records. She claimed that in the mid-1980s, a Forest Service technician named Peter Ruiz attempted to anchor one of the stones using a steel cable drilled into bedrock. The cable was found severed 3 weeks later. The stone had moved. Ruiz could not be located for comment. Forest Service employment records from that period list a Peter Ruiz as a seasonal maintenance worker, but his file contains no mention of boundary work. In 2004, a group of amateur researchers from the University of Washington Geology Department requested permission to conduct ground-penetrating radar surveys along the boundary line. The request was denied. A second request in 2007 was also denied. No explanation was provided. The most detailed account of the stones comes from the original surveyor's field notes, which were partially declassified in 2015 following a request by a journalist investigating lost Forest Service records. The notes, kept by a lead surveyor named Harold Munson during the 1932 boundary establishment, include an entry dated November 14, 1932. It reads, "Marker 18, placed at coordinates provided. Ground stable. Visibility good. Local guide. Yakima elder, name not recorded. Observed placement and asked to speak. Stated area was walking ground and should not be marked. Did not elaborate. Thanked him for his time. Proceeded to marker 19. 3 lines below that entry there is a handwritten addition in different ink, dated June 1948. Do not replace stones in section 14 through 31. Recommend boundary resurvey through alternate route. Justification. Redacted. The redaction is official. A black bar applied at the time of declassification covers roughly 15 words. Harold Munson died in 1961. No surviving family. Members could be located. His personnel file contains a note indicating he requested early retirement in 1949 and relocated to eastern Montana. He never worked for the Forest Service again. Today, the boundary stones remain where they were last observed, 11 feet northwest of their original positions. Hikers occasionally photograph them. GPS coordinates confirm their displacement. The Forest Service has placed small informational signs nearby, stating only, Historic Boundary Marker, Original Survey, 1932. The signs do not mention the movement. They do not mention the replacements. They do not mention why, in 1983, the decision was made to stop trying. On clear days, the stones cast long shadows through the forest. They sit in a line, each one slightly offset from where it should be, each one marking a boundary that no longer exists in the place it was drawn. And at night, when the forest is silent and the wind moves through the trees, the ground remains still. The stones do not. Some sounds should not repeat. Taklak Lak lies at an elevation of 4,600 feet in the southwestern corner of Gifford Pinchot National Forest, roughly 12 miles north of the small town of Trout Lake, Washington. It is a glacial lake formed thousands of years ago during the last ice age, fed by snowmelt from Mount Adams, a dormant stratovolcano that rises 12,281 feet to the north. The lake itself is small, covering only 55 acres with a maximum depth of 34 feet. Its water is clear and cold year-round, reflecting the mountain with near-perfect clarity on windless days. The lake has no inlet streams, no outlet channels. It is fed entirely by groundwater and seasonal runoff, and it drains through slow percolation into the surrounding volcanic soil. This makes it hydrologically isolated, a closed system. The Forest Service manages a small campground on the eastern shore, popular with photographers and families during the summer months. The western shore is less accessible, bordered by dense forest and uneven terrain. Few people go there. Those who do often bring cameras, and those cameras pick up something they should not. The first documented report came in July of 1976. A wildlife researcher named Kevin Strand was conducting a bird population survey around the lake, using a portable cassette recorder to log field notes. Strand set up his equipment near the western shore, intending to record ambient forest sounds for analysis. When he played back the tape that evening, he found his voice overlaid with a low, continuous static, a hissing noise that had not been audible during the recording. Strand assumed equipment malfunction. He tested the recorder the following day at a different location. It worked perfectly. When he returned to the western shore, the static returned. He reported the incident in his field notes, but did not pursue it further. The notes were filed with the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife and remained there, unexamined, until 2003. In August of 1989, a forest technician named Lisa Vukovich was conducting an acoustic study of the lake as part of a broader noise pollution assessment. She placed several digital recorders at intervals around the shoreline to capture baseline sound levels. The recorder positioned on the western shore, approximately 170 feet from the water's edge, produced a recording that Vukovich described in her report as corrupted. The file contained 47 seconds of radio static, looping continuously for the entire 6-hour recording period. No other sounds were present. No wind. No birds. No water movement. Just the static, repeating in identical 47-second intervals. Vukovich replaced the recorder. The second device produced the same result. She tried a third recorder from a different manufacturer. Same static, same duration. Same loop. Her supervisor reviewed the recordings and suggested electromagnetic interference, possibly from nearby radio towers or electrical lines. There are no radio towers within 15 miles of Takhlak Lake. The nearest power lines are over 20 miles away. Vukovic's report was filed with the Forest Service Regional Office in Vancouver, Washington. A copy was sent to the University of Washington Department of Earth and Space Sciences for review. No follow-up study was ever conducted. Over the next 2 decades, the phenomenon was observed sporadically by hikers, birdwatchers, and occasional researchers. Most dismissed it as equipment failure. Some did not. In 2007, a freelance sound engineer named Marcus Del Rosso visited the lake while working on a documentary about Pacific Northwest wilderness areas. Del Rosso had professional-grade recording equipment, shotgun microphones, digital audio interfaces, redundant storage systems. He spent an afternoon at the western shore attempting to capture high-fidelity recordings of the lake and surrounding forest. Every file was corrupted. Every microphone picked up the static. Del Rosso was experienced enough to recognize interference patterns. This was not electrical noise. It was not radio bleed. It was something recorded at the source, captured by the microphone as if the static were physically present in the air. He slowed down the audio, and that was when he heard it. Beneath the hiss, faint but unmistakable, was a human voice. A man's voice, counting backward. The numbers were unclear. The cadence was slow and deliberate. The voice did not sound distressed. It did not sound urgent. It simply counted, each number separated by roughly 3 seconds of static, descending in a sequence that Del Rosso could not identify. He isolated the clearest section and played it for a colleague, a forensic audio analyst in Portland. The analyst confirmed it was a human voice, likely male, middle-aged, speaking English. The numbers could not be transcribed with certainty. The static was too dense, but the counting was there. Del Rosso returned to the lake 3 more times over the following year. Each visit produced the same result: 47 seconds. Same static, same voice. He submitted his findings to the Forest Service, along with annotated audio files and technical analysis. The Forest Service replied with a brief letter thanking him for his report and stating that the matter would be reviewed. No further communication followed. A retired acoustic ecologist named Barbara Howell reviewed Del Rosso's recordings in 2011 after he posted them on a private research forum. Howell had spent 30 years studying natural soundscapes and had worked extensively in the Pacific Northwest. She listened to the files multiple times, applied various filters, and ran spectral analysis. Her conclusion, published in a small academic journal, was tentative but troubling. "The audio does not behave like interference," she wrote. "It behaves like a transmission. The loop suggests a recording, not a live broadcast. But the consistency, the fact that it appears on every device in every instance, suggests the source is environmental, not electronic." Howell noted one additional detail. The static was not random. When analyzed as a waveform, it contained repeating patterns, small fluctuations in amplitude and frequency that recurred at precise intervals. The patterns resembled modulation, as if the static were carrying information. She could not decode it. Local Yakima elders, when asked about the lake, were reluctant to speak on record. In a 2013 interview with a regional historian, one elder, who requested anonymity, described the western shore as a place where the air remembers things it should not. When pressed for details, the elder said only that the lake had been different before the 1950s, before the logging roads were cut through the forest nearby. "It used to be quiet," the elder said. "Now it speaks, but it speaks wrong." No explanation was offered for what changed in the 1950s, or why. In 2016, a team of graduate students from Oregon State University attempted a controlled study. They brought calibrated recording equipment, GPS units, and detailed documentation protocols. They placed microphones at 10-foot intervals along the western shore, extending from the water's edge to 200 feet into the forest. Every microphone within 200 feet of the shore captured the static. Beyond that distance, the recordings were clean. The boundary was precise. At 190 feet, the static was present. At 210 feet, it was absent. The transition was not gradual, it was binary. The students documented their findings and submitted them to their faculty advisor. The advisor forwarded the report to the United States Geological Survey. The USGS replied that the phenomenon fell outside their mandate and recommended contacting the Federal Communications Commission. The FCC stated that without evidence of illegal broadcasting, they could not investigate. The study was never published. One detail from the Oregon State research remains unexplained. The students noted that the static, when played at half speed, lasted 94 seconds. When played at quarter speed, it lasted 188 seconds. But the counting, when slowed, did not stretch proportionally. The intervals between numbers remained roughly 3 seconds, regardless of playback speed. As if the voice existed independently of the static surrounding it. As if it were always counting at the same rate, no matter how the recording was manipulated. Taklock Lake remains open to the public. The campground on the eastern shore sees regular visitors during the summer. The western shore is marked on maps but rarely visited. There are no warnings, no signs. The Forest Service maintains the area as it always has. Hikers still bring cameras, researchers still attempt recordings, and the static remains. 47 seconds, looping endlessly. A man's voice counting backward from a number no one can identify in a sequence that does not end. The lake reflects the mountain. The water is cold and clear. And 200 feet from the western shore, the air holds something it will not release. Some people appear exactly when they should not. Trail 157, officially designated as the Juniper Ridge Trail, runs for 8.3 miles along a volcanic ridgeline in the eastern section of Gifford Pinchot National Forest. It begins at an elevation of 3,200 feet near the town of Randall, Washington, and climbs steadily through second-growth forest before opening onto exposed ridge with views of Mount St. Helens to the west and Mount Adams to the south. The trail sees moderate use, popular enough to be maintained annually, remote enough to feel isolated. Most hikers complete it as a day trek, finishing well before sunset. The trail was established in 1968, cut by the Youth Conservation Corps as part of a broader expansion of recreational access in the Cascades. Historical records show it followed an older logging road from the 1920s, which itself traced a route used by indigenous travelers for generations before that. The area has no history of disappearances or unusual incidents, no major accidents, no documented fatalities. The trail has never had a fire tower. The first sighting occurred on September 12, 2003. A hiker named Gregory Tambor was descending the trail around 6:45 in the evening when he encountered a woman walking uphill toward him. She wore a bright yellow rain jacket, hiking boots, and a dark blue backpack. Tambor estimated her age as mid-30s. She appeared calm, unhurried. When they passed each other, she stopped and asked if he knew the way to the old fire tower that burned. Tambor told her he was not aware of any fire tower on the trail. The woman thanked him and continued uphill. Tambor finished his descent without incident. He did not report the encounter to anyone. It seemed unremarkable. In June of 2005, a couple from Portland, Rachel and Thomas Benoit, were hiking the trail late in the afternoon. At approximately 7:15, as they neared the ridgeline, they passed a woman in a yellow rain jacket walking in the opposite direction. She asked them the same question, directions to the old fire tower that burned. Thomas Benoit, an avid hiker familiar with the area, told her there was no fire tower on Juniper Ridge. The woman nodded, thanked them, and continued down the trail. The Benoits reached the trailhead parking lot 30 minutes later. The woman's vehicle was not there. No other cars were present. They mentioned it to a ranger the following day. The ranger checked the trail log. No one matching the woman's description had signed in that week. Over the next 14 years, 15 more hikers reported nearly identical encounters. The details varied slightly. The exact time ranged from 6:30 to 7:45 in the evening, but the core elements remained consistent. A woman in a yellow rain jacket, mid-30s, dark backpack, always polite, always asking about the fire tower. No one ever saw her reach the trailhead. No one ever saw her vehicle. No one ever learned her name. A forestry technician named Michael Okoro was the fourth person to report the encounter. It happened in August of 2007. Okoro was descending the trail alone around 7 o'clock when he passed the woman. She asked the question. He told her there was no fire tower. She smiled, thanked him, and walked on. Okoro, unlike the others, became curious. He turned around and watched her for several minutes as she climbed the trail. She moved steadily, without hesitation, never looking back. When she rounded a switchback and disappeared from view, Okoro continued his descent. At the trailhead, he checked the parking area. One vehicle, his own. He reported the incident to the Cowlitz Valley Ranger District. The report was filed under Lost Hiker Inquiry and marked resolved when no missing persons reports matched the description. A retired school teacher named Diane Fujimoto encountered the woman in October of 2009. Fujimoto had been hiking the trail regularly for over a decade and knew its history well. When the woman asked about the fire tower, Fujimoto stopped to explain that no such structure had ever existed on Juniper Ridge. The nearest fire tower, she said, was on Burley Mountain, 15 miles to the south, and it had never burned. The woman listened carefully, nodded, and said, "Maybe I'm thinking of a different trail." Fujimoto offered to help her find her way back to the parking area. The woman declined, saying she knew the way. She continued uphill. Fujimoto descended. When she reached her car, she waited for 20 minutes, expecting the woman to appear. She did not. Fujimoto filed a report with the Forest Service the following day. A ranger hiked the trail that afternoon, searching for signs of the woman or any indication of distress. The trail was empty. No abandoned gear, no footprints that seemed unusual. Nothing. By 2012, word of the repeating encounters had spread informally among local hiking communities. A thread appeared on a regional outdoor forum compiling sightings. Contributors described their encounters in careful detail. The descriptions matched. Yellow jacket, dark backpack. Same question, same approximate time of day. One forum user posting under the name Trail Doc claimed to have researched historical fire towers in the Gifford Pinchot area. According to their post, no fire tower had ever been constructed on or near Juniper Ridge. The closest tower, on Red Mountain, was built in 1934 and still stood. "She's asking about something that doesn't exist," the user wrote, "and she's been asking for almost a decade." In 2013, the Cowlitz Valley Ranger District received a formal inquiry from a journalist writing about unexplained phenomena in national forests. The journalist, Angela Price, had interviewed 7 people who claimed to have encountered the woman. She requested access to any incident reports or missing persons files related to the trail. The Forest Service provided copies of 3 filed reports: Okoro's from 2007, Fujimoto's from 2009, and a third from a hiker named Samuel Okafor in 2011. All three described the same woman. All three noted the question about the fire tower. All three were marked resolved, no emergency response required. Price's article, published in a small regional magazine in 2014, documented the encounters but offered no conclusions. She noted the consistency of the sightings and the absence of any corresponding missing persons cases. She interviewed a cognitive psychologist who suggested the possibility of collective suggestion, hikers hearing about the woman and then misinterpreting normal encounters. Price found the theory unconvincing but had no alternative explanation. The encounters continued. In May of 2016, a group of 3 hikers, Melissa Tran, Jordan Wu, and Kevin O'Malley, encountered the woman near the 4-mile marker. It was 7:20 in the evening. The woman asked her question. O'Malley, who had heard about the phenomenon, asked the woman for her name. She smiled and said, "I'm sorry, I should keep moving." She walked past them and continued uphill. The group watched her until she disappeared around a bend. They did not follow. At the trailhead, they found no other vehicles. They reported the encounter to the ranger station. The report was filed and flagged as part of an ongoing pattern of concern. In 2018, the Forest Service commissioned a brief review of the incidents. A staff analyst compiled all available reports, cross-referenced them with missing persons databases, and checked historical records for any fire towers or structures that might explain the woman's question. The review found no matches, no missing persons fitting the description, no fire towers, no documented fatalities on the trail. The analyst's memo, dated November 2018, concluded, "Encounters appear genuine but lack sufficient evidence for emergency response. Recommend continued monitoring." The final documented encounter occurred on August 3, 2019. A solo hiker named Rebecca Lindstrom was descending the trail at sunset when she met the woman in the yellow jacket. The woman asked the question. Lindstrom, who had read about the sightings online, asked where the woman had started her hike. The woman paused, then said, "I've been looking for a while." Lindstrom asked if she needed help. The woman said no, thanked her, and continued uphill. Lindstrom reached the trailhead at 8:30. No other vehicles. She called the ranger station from her car. A ranger hiked the trail the following morning. No sign of the woman, no abandoned gear, no disturbance. Lindstrom posted about the encounter on social media. The post was shared widely. Within a week, 3 different search and rescue teams volunteered to sweep the trail. The Forest Service declined the offers, stating there was no evidence of an emergency. Since 2019, no new sightings have been reported. The trail remains open and well-maintained. Hikers continue to use it regularly, especially during summer and fall. Some go looking for the woman. Most do not find anything unusual, but the reports remain on file. 17 encounters, 8 missing persons investigations, 0 identifications. And somewhere in the Forest Service archives, there is a map of Juniper Ridge Trail, marked with small red dots, each one indicating a location where someone asked about a fire tower that never existed. The dots form a line, not random, not scattered. A line that leads steadily uphill deeper into the forest toward a destination that has no name and cannot be found on any map. There are places where sound refuses to travel. Indian Heaven Wilderness covers 20,340 acres in the southern Cascade Range of Washington State, roughly 30 miles north of the Columbia River Gorge. The region is characterized by volcanic features, cinder cones, lava flows, and over 150 small lakes formed in ancient craters. The area's volcanic history stretches back thousands of years, with the most recent significant activity occurring approximately 8,000 years ago. The terrain is rugged but passable, marked by lodgepole pine forests, subalpine meadows, and exposed basalt formations. 3 miles east of the wilderness boundary, on land managed by the Gifford Pinchot National Forest, there exists a circular depression that appears on no geological surveys. It measures 40 feet in diameter, with walls that slope inward at a consistent angle of 22 degrees. The depth at the center is 11 feet. The symmetry is absolute. Measured by 3 separate teams over 4 decades, the deviation from perfect circularity is less than 6 inches at any point along the rim. The crater sits at an elevation of 4,900 feet, surrounded by dense coniferous forest. No trails lead to it. No signage marks its location. It was discovered by accident in 1973, and it has remained quietly unresolved ever since. A forestry survey team led by Richard Hooper was conducting a timber assessment in the area during the summer of 1973. The team was mapping old-growth stands when a technician named Laura Vasquez noticed an unusual clearing roughly 200 yards off their plotted course. Hooper ordered a detour to investigate. What they found was the depression, perfectly round, remarkably uniform, and utterly silent. Vasquez later described the experience in a 1998 interview with a regional geology journal. "We stood at the edge and looked down," she said. "It was like looking into a bowl. The walls were smooth, covered in moss and pine needles. There were trees growing inside, maybe a dozen small pines, all healthy. But when we called down into it, our voices didn't echo. They just stopped." Hooper's team spent 2 hours documenting the site. They took photographs, made measurements, and collected soil samples from the rim and floor. The samples were sent to the United States Geological Survey for analysis. The results showed nothing unusual. Standard volcanic soil composition, consistent with the surrounding forest. No signs of impact, no elevated mineral content, no indication of explosive formation. The USGS report, dated October 1973, concluded, "Depression appears natural in origin, likely formed by subsidence or erosion. No further investigation recommended." Hooper disagreed. In a handwritten note attached to the survey file, he wrote, "This is not subsidence. The walls are too clean, the shape is too perfect. Something made this, and I do not know what." The site was visited again in 1981 by a graduate student in geology named Michael Brennan, who had read Hooper's original report and was skeptical of the subsidence theory. Brennan hiked to the location with a faculty advisor and a portable seismograph. They spent 3 days conducting tests. Brennan's thesis, completed in 1982, included a section on the depression. He noted several anomalies. First, the bedrock beneath the site showed no fracturing or collapse structures that would suggest subsidence. Second, the soil layers within the crater were horizontally consistent, with no evidence of disruption or mixing. Third, and most puzzling, the trees growing inside the depression showed growth rings consistent with trees outside, meaning they were the same age, despite the crater's apparent formation predating their existence. Brennan also noted the acoustic anomaly. "Sound does not propagate normally within the depression," he wrote. "Voices, hand claps, and other sharp sounds produce no echo and seem to diminish rapidly." The effect is consistent regardless of atmospheric conditions. He could offer no explanation. His thesis advisor recommended removing the section before publication. Brennan complied. The original draft remains in the archives of the University of Washington Geology Department. In 1994, a team from the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network visited the site as part of a broader study on volcanic subsurface structures. The team included Dr. Patricia Okoro, a geophysicist with over 20 years of experience in the region. Okoro had reviewed Brennan's unpublished notes and was curious about the crater. The team deployed ground-penetrating radar and conducted a detailed subsurface scan. The results showed solid bedrock extending at least 60 feet below the crater floor. No voids, no cavities, no evidence of collapse. The depression appeared to have been carved out of solid rock, as if something had simply removed the material. Okoro's field notes from the visit include a passage that was not included in the official report. "We set up recording equipment at the crater rim to capture ambient seismic noise," she wrote. "The equipment inside the crater recorded nothing. No background tremor, no microseismic activity. Nothing. Equipment placed 50 feet outside the rim recorded normal levels. There is no geological explanation for this." The official report, submitted to the USGS in 1995, described the crater as a well-preserved erosional feature and recommended no further study. Okoro did not contest the conclusion. She later told a colleague that she was advised the site did not warrant additional funding. Local knowledge of the crater is sparse. The nearest town, Trout Lake, is 12 miles to the south. Few residents hike in that area. Those who do rarely mention the depression. In 2006, a freelance writer researching unusual geological formations in Washington interviewed several longtime Trout Lake residents. One, a retired logger named Frank Desmond, recalled hearing about the crater in the 1980s. "Some of the guys used to talk about it," Desmond said. "They called it the Quiet Hole. Said if you went in there and stood at the bottom, you couldn't hear anything. No wind, no birds, nothing. A few of them thought it was bad luck. Yakima folks we worked with wouldn't go near it. They said the ground was dead there." Desmond claimed he had never visited the site himself. When asked if he knew anyone who had, he said no. In 2011, a team of amateur researchers using GPS coordinates from Brennan's thesis attempted to locate the crater. They found it after a 6-hour search. The depression was unchanged. The trees inside had grown but remained healthy. The researchers brought a decibel meter and conducted acoustic tests. At the rim, normal forest sounds registered between 40 and 50 decibels. Wind, birds, rustling leaves. Inside the crater, the meter registered ambient noise below 10 decibels even during windy conditions. One researcher described it in an online forum as standing inside a recording studio with the soundproofing turned on. The group returned a week later with video equipment. The footage shows the crater in daylight, trees standing motionless despite visible wind movement in the surrounding forest. When one researcher calls out from the rim, his voice is audible. When another calls from inside the crater, the sound is muted, as if absorbed by the air itself. The footage was uploaded to a video sharing site in 2012. It received minimal attention. The GPS coordinates were included in the video description. Several viewers claimed to have visited the site. All reported the same acoustic anomaly. None could explain it. In 2017, the Forest Service conducted a routine aerial survey of the area using LiDAR technology. The resulting topographic map showed the crater clearly, a perfect circle exactly 40 feet across. The data was vitalized with the regional office. No follow-up investigation was initiated. A request for soil analysis submitted in 2019 by an independent researcher was denied. The Forest Service cited budget constraints and stated that the site does not present any public safety concerns or resource management issues. The crater remains accessible to anyone willing to hike off-trail. No markers indicate its presence. No warnings have been posted. It exists in administrative silence, documented but unexplained, measured but ignored. And inside, the trees grow in a stillness that should not exist. The wind moves through the forest above, bending branches and carrying sound for miles. But 40 feet below, in a depression with no origin and no name, the air holds nothing. No echo. No movement. No sound at all. Just the trees standing in a silence older than their roots. Some cold has no source. Forest Road 90 runs for 23 miles through the eastern section of Gifford Pinchot National Forest, connecting the small logging town of Randall, Washington, to a network of recreational trails near the Cispus River. The road was constructed in 1958 by the Forest Service to facilitate timber access and fire suppression operations. It is a single-lane gravel road, unpaved, maintained seasonally depending on budget and weather conditions. Elevation ranges from 2,800 feet at the southern terminus to 4,200 feet at its highest point near Juniper Peak. The road passes through mixed coniferous forest, Douglas fir, western hemlock, and lodgepole pine. The terrain is typical of the southern Cascades. Moderate slopes, volcanic soil, and seasonal snowpack that usually clears by late May. There are no unusual geological features in the immediate area. No caves, no thermal vents, no underground streams that would explain localized temperature variation. Yet for over 50 years, a 60-foot section of the road, located at mile marker 14.6, has remained inexplicably cold. The anomaly was first documented in July of 1972 by a Forest Service road maintenance crew led by Supervisor Dale Kensington. The crew was grading the road in preparation for summer traffic when they encountered a patch of frost at mile marker 14.6. The air temperature that morning was 73 degrees Fahrenheit. The frost covered the road surface completely, a thin white layer extending for roughly 60 feet, before stopping abruptly. Kensington assumed the frost was residual, a pocket of cold air trapped by local topography. He instructed the crew to proceed. When they returned 2 hours later, the frost had not melted. The surrounding road surface was warm to the touch. The frosted section remained cold. Kensington's incident report, filed on July 19, 1972, noted the anomaly and requested a follow-up inspection. A Forest Service technician named Margaret Polson visited the site 3 days later with a handheld thermometer. She measured the air temperature at various points along the road. At mile marker 14.4, the temperature was 76 degrees. At mile marker 14.6, the frosted section, the temperature was 57 degrees. At mile marker 14.8, it returned to 76 degrees. Polson documented the readings and returned the following week with more sophisticated equipment. The differential remained. She could offer no explanation. Her report suggested possible ground temperature variation due to subsurface water flow or shaded microclimates. Neither theory fit the observed conditions. The cold patch became a minor curiosity among local road crews. Drivers learned to expect frost there, even in summer. Some avoided the section entirely during winter, citing concerns about black ice forming in otherwise dry conditions. In 1978, a logging truck carrying a full load skidded on unexpected ice at mile marker 14.6, veering off the road and damaging its axle. The driver, a man named Victor Morales, told investigators that the ice appeared without warning, like driving into a freezer. The Forest Service placed a small warning sign at mile marker 14, icy conditions possible year-round. No further explanation was provided. In 1984, a meteorologist from the University of Washington named Dr. Raymond Gallo visited the site as part of a study on microclimates in the Cascade Range. Gallo had read about the cold patch in a regional forestry bulletin and was skeptical. Microclimates, he believed, could account for temperature variations of a few degrees, but not the 19-degree differential reported at Forest Road 90. Gallo spent 4 days at the site in August, a month when daytime temperatures typically exceeded 80 degrees. He deployed multiple thermometers at ground level, chest height, and 10 feet above the road surface. He measured soil temperature at various depths. He recorded wind speed, humidity, and solar exposure. The results were consistent. At mile marker 14.6, the temperature was always colder. between 15 and 22 degrees colder, depending on time of day. The differential was greatest at midday, when solar heating should have been most intense. The cold extended vertically as well. Air temperature 10 feet above the road was still measurably colder than surrounding areas. Gallo's report, submitted to the National Weather Service in 1985, described the phenomenon as thermally anomalous and suggested further study. The report included a recommendation for geological surveys to identify possible subsurface features, caves, aquifers, or volcanic vents that might explain the temperature gradient. No follow-up study was conducted. Gallo later told a colleague that his research proposal was rejected twice. They said it wasn't a priority, he recalled in a 2003 interview. But I think they just didn't want to admit they had no idea what was causing it. Local residents offered their own theories. A retired logger named Harold Itkin, who had worked in the area since the 1960s, claimed the cold patch had always been there, long before the road was built. The old-timers used to talk about it, Itkin said in a 1998 interview with a regional newspaper. They called it the ice spot, said it never warmed up, even in the middle of summer. Some of the Cowlitz folks we worked with wouldn't go near it. They said the ground was sick. Itkin could not recall specifics about the indigenous perspectives, only that the area was considered off by some. Attempts to verify these accounts with local tribal historians produced limited results. One elder, speaking off the record in 2001, acknowledged that certain areas in the forest were traditionally avoided, but declined to specify locations or reasons. In 1996, a team of geologists from the United States Geological Survey conducted a brief survey of Forest Road 90 as part of a broader assessment of volcanic activity in the Gifford Pinchot region. The team included Dr. Sandra Kowalski, a specialist in geothermal anomalies. Kowalski was aware of the cold patch and included it in the survey itinerary. The team used ground-penetrating radar and thermal imaging to map subsurface conditions. The data showed no volcanic heat sources, no underground water flows, and no geological structures that would explain localized cooling. The bedrock beneath the road was solid basalt, consistent with the surrounding area. The soil composition was unremarkable. Kowalski's field notes, later obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request, included a passage that did not appear in the official report. "We found nothing," she wrote. "No thermal vents, no aquifers, no caves. The cold is there, measurable and consistent, but it has no apparent source. It simply exists." The official USGS report, published in 1997, made no mention of the cold patch. When asked about the omission in a 2009 interview, Kowalski said, "We couldn't explain it, so we didn't include it. That's how it works sometimes." In 2004, a freelance journalist named Paul Desmond spent a week camping near mile marker 14.6, conducting his own informal study. Desmond had read Gallo's report and was determined to document the phenomenon comprehensively. He brought camping gear, thermometers, a video camera, and a portable weather station. Desmond's recordings, later uploaded to a personal blog, showed the temperature differential clearly. On July 23, 2004, the ambient air temperature at mile marker 14.4 was 81 degrees. At mile marker 14.6, it was 62 degrees. Frost formed on the road surface overnight, despite clear skies and no dew elsewhere. Desmond also noted something others had not explicitly documented. The cold did not radiate outward. It stopped at a precise boundary. He placed thermometers at 5-foot intervals along the road. The temperature dropped sharply within a 10-foot span at the start of the cold patch, remained constant for 60 feet, then rose sharply again at the end. The transition zones were abrupt, almost binary. "It's like someone drew a line," Desmond wrote. "On one side it's summer, on the other it's late autumn, and the line doesn't move." Forest Service maintenance records from 2010 show that the cold patch remains a persistent concern. Gravel resurfacing in that section requires special procedures. Standard asphalt cannot be used because the cold prevents proper curing. Road crews report equipment malfunctions, engine temperature sensors giving false readings, tire pressure dropping unexpectedly. One crew foreman, speaking anonymously in 2015, described the experience of working at mile marker 14.6. "You feel it the moment you step into that section," he said. "Not just the temperature, there's something else. It's hard to explain. You just want to finish the job and leave." No official studies have been conducted since 1996. The Forest Service continues to maintain the road, but the cold patch is no longer actively investigated. Requests for research permits in the area have been quietly declined. A 2018 inquiry from a university physics department received a brief reply stating that the site does not present conditions suitable for academic study. The warning sign remains at mile marker 14. Drivers pass through the cold patch daily during summer months. Some notice the sudden chill. Most do not. The frost appears when conditions allow. The temperature differential persists. And at the center of the 60-foot section, where the cold is deepest, the ground remains frozen beneath a thin layer of gravel. Frozen in July, frozen in August, frozen in every season without source or explanation. Just cold, constant and inexplicable. A pocket of winter that never left. Some places erase themselves from memory. The northern reaches of Gifford Pinchot National Forest stretch across nearly 1.3 million acres of mountainous terrain in southern Washington state. Established in 1908, the forest was one of the earliest additions to the National Forest System created to preserve timber resources and watershed integrity in the Cascade Range. The area has been logged, surveyed, and mapped extensively over the past century. Roads were cut, trails established, and recreational facilities built to accommodate the growing number of visitors seeking wilderness access after World War II. Between 1956 and 1961, Forest Service maps clearly show a developed campground called Tillicum, located approximately 6 miles northwest of the Spirit Lake Access Road. The maps indicate 12 designated campsites, a ranger contact station, vault toilets, and a maintained gravel road leading from Forest Road 25. Tillicum was classified as a primitive campground, minimal amenities, no running water, accessible by vehicle during summer months only. Then, without explanation, it vanished from every map produced after 1961. The discrepancy was first noticed in 1987 by a retired Forest Service cartographer named Ellen Bjornstad. Bjornstad had worked in the agency's mapping division from 1953 until her retirement in 1985. While organizing her personal archive of historical maps, she discovered a 1958 regional map showing Tillicum Campground clearly marked, with coordinates placing it at 46.27 degrees north latitude, 121.81 degrees west longitude. Bjornstad compared the map to current Forest Service documentation. Tillicum was absent. She checked interim maps from 1960 through 1970. The campground appeared on maps dated through 1961, then disappeared. No notation indicated closure, relocation, or decommissioning. It simply ceased to exist in official records. Curious, Bjornstad contacted the Forest Service Regional Office in Vancouver, Washington. She requested historical records related to Tillicum Campground, construction documents, maintenance logs, closure notices. The response, dated March 19, 1988, stated that no records could be located for a campground by that name. The letter suggested she might be misremembering the location or confusing it with another facility. Bjornstad was certain she was not mistaken. She had personally drafted updates to that section of the forest in 1959. Tillicum had been operational then. She remembered reviewing site inspection reports. She contacted former colleagues. 3 confirmed they remembered Tillicum. 1, a retired ranger named Douglas Kowalski, recalled visiting the campground in the summer of 1960 during a routine patrol. It was small, Kowalski said in a 1989 interview. Maybe a dozen sites scattered through the trees. Quiet place. Not many people used it. The road was rough, but passable if you took it slow. When asked why it might have been closed, Kowalski had no answer. I left that district in '61, he said. When I came back through the area in '68, I didn't see any signs for it. Figured it had been decommissioned. Happened a lot back then. Places that didn't get enough use got shut down. But decommissioned campgrounds leave traces, road scars, cleared sites, fire rings. Signage, even if removed, leaves post holes. Tillicum left nothing. In 1992, a geography graduate student named Michael Vasquez decided to investigate Bjornstad's findings for his thesis on abandoned recreational sites in the Pacific Northwest. Vasquez obtained copies of the 1958 maps and used the listed coordinates to locate where Tillicum should have been. He hiked to the site in July of 1992, equipped with a GPS unit, a metal detector, and a camera. He found unbroken forest, dense stands of Douglas fir and western hemlock, thick undergrowth, no evidence of human activity, no cleared areas, no road remnants, no infrastructure. Vasquez expanded his search, covering a quarter-mile radius around the coordinates. Nothing. He used the metal detector to scan for buried infrastructure, nails, hinges, tools, anything that might indicate prior development. The detector remained silent. Most troubling, Vasquez took core samples from several large trees growing precisely where the maps indicated campsites should have been. The samples were analyzed by a dendrochronologist at Oregon State University. The trees were over 200 years old. They had been growing long before the campground supposedly existed. Vasquez's thesis, completed in 1993, included a section titled The Tillicum Paradox. He documented the discrepancy between the maps and the physical evidence, noted the absence of Forest Service records, and interviewed Bjornstad and Kowalski. His conclusion was cautious. Either the maps were incorrect, or the site was developed in a location different from the coordinates provided. No physical evidence supports the existence of Tillicum Campground at the documented location. His thesis advisor encouraged him to pursue the mystery further. Vasquez declined. In a 2006 interview, he explained why. "The more I looked into it, the less sense it made," he said. The maps were official, multiple editions, different cartographers, all showing the same location. But there was nothing there. And when I asked the Forest Service for an explanation, I got nowhere. Eventually, I moved on. Other researchers did not move on. In 2001, a historian named Patricia Nguyen was compiling a comprehensive database of all recreational facilities in Washington's national forests from 1900 to 2000. Nguyen's research included archival newspaper articles, visitor logs, and budget documents. She found 3 references to Tillicum Campground. The first was a brief mention in a 1957 issue of the Longview Daily News, listing Tillicum among new recreational opportunities in Gifford Pinchot National Forest. The second was a 1959 Forest Service budget document allocating funds for road maintenance and sanitation services at Tillicum. The third was a visitor log entry from 1960, signed by a family from Oregon who stayed at Site Number 7 for 2 nights in August. Nguyen contacted the family using phone records and genealogical databases to track them down. The father, now elderly, remembered the trip vaguely. "We camped a lot in those days," he said. "I don't recall that specific place, but if it's in my handwriting, we were there." Nguyen requested access to Forest Service archives to examine original construction and maintenance records. Her request was denied. The Forest Service replied that records from that period had been consolidated and digitized in the 1980s, and many physical documents had been discarded. Tilikum, if it had ever existed, was not in the digital database. Nguyen published her findings in a regional history journal in 2003. The article, titled "Ghost Campgrounds of the Gifford Pinchot," detailed Tilikum and two other sites that appeared on historical maps but could not be verified. Nguyen stopped short of calling it a mystery, instead suggesting bureaucratic error or map misclassification. Privately, she was less certain. In an email to a colleague, obtained years later, she wrote, "I've reviewed hundreds of campground records. Errors happen, but not like this." Tilikum appears on 5 separate maps over 6 years, with consistent coordinates, site counts, and facility descriptions. Then it's gone, not closed, not relocated, erased. In 2009, a team of amateur historians and GPS enthusiasts organized an expedition to the Tilikum coordinates. The group, calling themselves the Pacific Northwest Historical Survey, included a retired civil engineer, a surveyor, and a Forest Service volunteer. They spent 3 days searching the area using historical maps, modern GPS, and ground-penetrating radar. They found nothing. The forest was undisturbed. The radar detected no subsurface anomalies, no buried roads, no foundation remnants, no compacted soil that would indicate prior clearing. One team member, an engineer named Robert Itkin, described the experience in an online forum. "It's like the forest reset itself," he wrote. "If a campground was there, nature reclaimed it completely. But that doesn't happen in 50 years, not without leaving something behind." The group submitted a report to the Forest Service requesting clarification. The response, dated November 2009, was brief. The Forest Service has no record of Tilikum Campground. Historical maps may contain inaccuracies due to outdated surveying methods or clerical errors. We appreciate your interest in forest history. The letter offered no explanation for why the same error appeared across multiple years and map editions. One detail, buried in Bjornstad's personal archive and later obtained by researchers, adds a final layer of strangeness. In her notes from 1959, she recorded a conversation with a field surveyor who had visited Tilikum to verify its placement for map updates. The surveyor's name was not recorded, but his comment was, "Coordinates confirmed. 12 sites visible. Access road passable. Recommend noting seasonal closure. Snow lingers late in this area. Local contact mentioned site has old usage, predating Forest Service development. Did not elaborate." The phrase, "old usage," was never explained. No follow-up was documented. Today, the coordinates for Tilikum Campground lead to a forest indistinguishable from any other in the Gifford Pinchot. No trails pass nearby. No signs mark the location. The trees grow tall and undisturbed, their rings recording centuries undisturbed by human presence. But in file cabinets and archives, the maps remain. Tilikum Campground, marked clearly. 12 sites. A ranger station. A road that led somewhere. And in the forest, where it should have been, there is only silence. The kind of silence that remembers nothing. The kind that should not exist where people once slept under canvas and built fires and signed visitor logs in neat handwriting. The forest does not remember, and perhaps that is what makes it most unsettling. There are places where north loses its meaning. Dark Meadow sits at an elevation of 4,300 feet in the western section of Gifford Pinchot National Forest, roughly 9 miles southeast of Mount St. Helens. The meadow itself is unremarkable, a clearing of approximately 12 acres, bordered by mature stands of noble fir and western hemlock. It earned its name not from any sinister reputation, but from the dense canopy surrounding it which keeps the clearing in shadow for most of the day. The area receives moderate foot traffic during summer months, primarily from hikers using the nearby Dark Mountain Trail. The meadow has been accessible since the 1930s, when the Civilian Conservation Corps cut trails through this section of forest. Historical records show no unusual incidents, no disappearances, no accidents of note. The terrain is stable, volcanic soil over bedrock, typical of the Cascade Range. The United States Geological Survey has never identified any unusual magnetic or geological features in the area, yet compasses have been failing there for at least 50 years. The first documented report came in June of 1974. A Boy Scout troop from Longview, Washington, was conducting a navigation exercise in the Dark Meadow area under the supervision of Scoutmaster Leonard Pritchard. The exercise required scouts to use compass and map to navigate between designated waypoints. At approximately 2 in the afternoon, several scouts reported that their compasses were acting strange. Pritchard examined the compasses himself. All 5 were spinning slowly, their needles rotating in a continuous clockwise motion. When he moved 50 yards south, away from the grove of trees on the meadow's eastern edge, the compasses stabilized. When he returned to his original position, they began spinning again. Pritchard filed a brief incident report with the ranger station in Randall, noting the compass malfunction and suggesting a possible magnetic anomaly. The report was acknowledged but not investigated. Pritchard assumed the issue was localized interference, perhaps buried metal debris or a peculiarity in the underlying rock. He returned to the area in August of 1975 with a more sophisticated compass, a surveyor-grade instrument designed to resist interference. It behaved identically to the Boy Scout compasses. Within a certain radius of the eastern grove, the needle would not hold north. Instead, it pointed consistently toward the center of the grove, regardless of where Pritchard stood. He measured the affected area by walking in a slow circle, noting where the compass began to malfunction. The radius was consistent, approximately 1,300 feet from a point he estimated to be at the grove's center. Beyond that distance, compasses worked normally. Within it, they pointed inward. Pritchard's second report, filed in September of 1975, was more detailed. He included sketches showing the affected radius, noted the consistent behavior of multiple compass types, and requested a geological survey. The Forest Service responded with a form letter thanking him for his report and stating that the matter would be reviewed. No review was conducted. Over the following decade, other hikers and outdoor enthusiasts encountered the same phenomenon. A 1982 article in a regional hiking newsletter mentioned the compass problem at Dark Meadow, describing it as a curiosity that affected navigation equipment. The author, a wildlife photographer named Sandra Delgado, noted that she had experienced the issue firsthand while attempting to orient herself for a sunrise shoot. "I thought my compass was broken," Delgado wrote, "but when I borrowed a friend's compass, it did the same thing, pointed east, straight toward the trees, no matter which direction I faced. We joked about magnetic rocks, but later, when I mentioned it to a ranger, he just nodded, like he already knew." In 1987, a geology student from the University of Washington named Martin Kelleher visited Dark Meadow as part of a field study on volcanic formations. Kelleher had read Delgado's article and was skeptical. Magnetic anomalies, he believed, were typically caused by concentrations of magnetite or other ferromagnetic minerals. He brought a magnetometer, an instrument designed to measure magnetic field strength and direction. The magnetometer confirmed an anomaly. Within the affected radius, the magnetic field was measurably distorted, not stronger, but redirected. The instrument consistently indicated a magnetic pull toward the grove's center. Kelleher took soil samples and returned to the university for analysis. The samples showed normal mineral composition, no magnetite concentrations, no metallic debris, nothing that would explain the compass behavior. Kelleher's field report, submitted to his faculty advisor in March of 1988, included a recommendation for further study. The advisor forwarded the report to the Forest Service. No response was received. Kelleher later attempted to secure funding for a more comprehensive survey, including ground-penetrating radar and electromagnetic mapping. His grant applications were denied. In a 2004 interview, Kelleher recalled his frustration. "It was a legitimate anomaly," he said. "Measurable, consistent, but no one seemed interested. I got the sense that the Forest Service didn't want people digging around there." Hikers continued to report compass failures throughout the 1990s and 2000s. With the advent of handheld GPS devices, new problems emerged. In 2001, a backpacker named Rachel Okafor posted on an online hiking forum about her experience at Dark Meadow. She had relied on a GPS unit for navigation, but within a certain area near the Eastern Grove, the device became unreliable. "It kept recalibrating," Okafor wrote. "The position would jump around, sometimes by 100 feet or more. Then it would lock again, then jump. My compass app did the same thing, just spun in circles. I ended up navigating by landmarks until I was clear of the area." Other users replied with similar experiences. One mentioned that their two-way radio had stopped working in the same location, producing only static and a low, rhythmic hum. Another noted that their smartphone's compass function had gone haywire near the grove, pointing in random directions before settling on a fixed bearing toward the trees. In 2009, a team of amateur researchers from Portland organized an expedition to Dark Meadow with the goal of documenting the anomaly comprehensively. The team included a former electrical engineer, a surveyor, and a radio technician. They brought multiple compass types, GPS units, magnetometers, and radio equipment. Their findings, posted on a personal blog, confirmed everything previous visitors had reported. Compasses pointed toward the grove. GPS devices became unstable within the affected radius. Handheld radios produced only static or a low-frequency hum when transmitting from inside the zone. The team attempted to triangulate the exact center of the anomaly using their instruments. The readings converged on a point approximately 60 feet into the grove in an area with no visible features, just trees and undergrowth. The team requested permission from the Forest Service to conduct a more invasive survey, including soil excavation and electromagnetic probing. The request was denied. The Forest Service reply, dated December 2009, stated that the area was ecologically sensitive and that subsurface disturbance could harm root systems and soil integrity. No explanation was given for why this particular grove warranted such protection, while similar areas throughout the forest were routinely surveyed and studied. In 2013, a geophysicist from Oregon State University named Dr. William Vasquez submitted a formal research proposal to study the Dark Meadow anomaly. Vasquez had reviewed the available reports and was convinced the phenomenon was real and worthy of serious investigation. His proposal included non-invasive methods: aerial magnetic surveys, seismic tomography, and detailed electromagnetic mapping. The proposal was denied. Vasquez appealed the decision, citing the scientific value of studying an unexplained geomagnetic feature. The appeal was denied. In a follow-up letter, the Forest Service stated that the area had been evaluated and determined to be a minor magnetic irregularity consistent with localized mineral deposits. The letter concluded, "Further study is not warranted and would represent an unnecessary expenditure of resources." Vasquez later obtained a copy of the evaluation referenced in the letter through a Freedom of Information Act request. The document was 3 pages long, dated 1994, and contained no raw data, no field measurements, and no author identification. It concluded that the anomaly was naturally occurring and of no concern. Vasquez found the evaluation unconvincing. "It read like someone checking a box," he said in a 2016 interview. "There was no actual science in it, just a conclusion without evidence." Local knowledge of the grove is limited but consistent. A retired logger named Frank Morales, who worked in the area during the 1980s, recalled that crews avoided felling trees in that particular section. "The foreman said it was a buffer zone," Morales explained. "But we all knew the compasses went crazy there. Some of the guys said it was bad luck. I don't know about that, but I do know we left it alone." When asked if he had heard any explanations for the compass problem, Morales shook his head. "People talked. Some said it was an old meteor buried there. Some said it was leftover mining equipment. But no one really knew, and no one seemed interested in finding out." The anomaly persists. Hikers still report compass failures at Dark Meadow. GPS devices still recalibrate endlessly within the affected radius. Handheld radios still hum with low-frequency static. The Forest Service still declines research proposals. And at the center of the grove, 60 feet from the meadow's edge, the ground remains undisturbed. No one has drilled there. No one has excavated. No one has been allowed to measure what lies beneath. Just trees growing in a circle, and beneath them something that pulls every compass needle inward, something that disrupts signals and confuses instruments designed to find true north. The compasses spin, the needles point, and the forest keeps its secret. Sound does not always obey the rules of physics. The Mount Adams Wilderness encompasses 47,300 acres on the eastern flank of Mount Adams, Washington's second highest peak at 12,281 feet. Established as a protected wilderness area in 1964, the region is characterized by alpine meadows, glacial valleys, and exposed volcanic terrain. The elevation ranges from 3,000 to over 12,000 feet, creating diverse ecosystems and challenging topography. The area sees moderate recreational use: climbers attempting the summit, backpackers traversing the Pacific Crest Trail, and day hikers exploring the lower meadows. The upper elevations, above 7,000 feet, are less trafficked. The terrain becomes steeper, the weather more unpredictable. Snowfields persist year-round in sheltered basins. The tree line gives way to sparse alpine vegetation and bare rock. It is remote country, accessible only on foot, miles from the nearest road. In this high country, there are 3 clearings where sound behaves impossibly. The anomaly was first documented in August of 1979 by a climbing party led by Thomas Gallo, an experienced mountaineer from Seattle. Gallo and 3 companions were descending from a failed summit attempt when they stopped to rest in a small alpine basin at approximately 8,200 feet elevation. The basin was roughly circular, perhaps 150 feet across, ringed by steep walls of volcanic rock. While resting, one of the climbers, a man named Kevin Lindstrom, called out to test the echo. The sound of his voice traveled across the basin and returned. But it returned slowly. Lindstrom estimated the delay at 5 or 6 seconds, far longer than the distance should have allowed. Sound travels approximately 1,100 feet per second at that elevation. The basin's dimensions suggested an echo delay of less than half a second. Gallo, trained in physics, was puzzled. He conducted a simple experiment. He clapped his hands sharply 3 times in succession, spacing the claps roughly 1 second apart. The echoes returned after a long delay, but they returned in reverse order. The 3rd clap echoed first, then the 2nd, then the 1st. Gallo's climbing journal, later shared with researchers, includes this entry: "Echoes behaving strangely, delay too long for terrain, order reversed, checked for ice caves or hidden recesses, found none, cannot explain." The party descended without further incident. Gallo mentioned the experience to fellow climbers, but did not pursue formal documentation. It remained an anecdote, a curiosity shared over beer in climbing gyms. In 1986, a different party encountered the same phenomenon in a different location. A group of backpackers led by Sandra Brennan was camping near Hell Roaring Meadow, at approximately 7,500 feet. Late in the evening, one member of the group, a geology student named Michael Vasquez, shouted toward a nearby rock face to hear the echo. The echo returned after what Vasquez estimated was 7 seconds. The rock face was no more than 200 feet away. He tried again, this time clapping twice. The echoes returned separately, delayed, and, like Gallo's experience, in reversed order. Brennan, an amateur naturalist, was intrigued. She attempted her own tests the following morning. She spoke a simple phrase, 1, 2, 3. The echoes returned clearly, 3, 2, 1. She recorded the phenomenon in her trip journal and, upon returning home, contacted the Forest Service to report what she described as unusual acoustic properties in the hell-roaring area. The Forest Service reply, dated October 1986, thanked her for the report and stated that acoustic anomalies in mountainous terrain were not uncommon due to complex reflection patterns. No investigation was suggested. Brennan was not satisfied. She contacted the University of Washington Physics Department, describing her observations. A professor responded with polite skepticism, suggesting temperature inversions or wind patterns might create unusual acoustic effects. He did not offer to investigate. In 1992, a third location exhibiting the same behavior was identified. A solo hiker named Patricia Del Rosso was traversing a high ridge near Battlement Ridge at approximately 8,500 feet when she stopped in a small, bowl-shaped clearing to rest. Testing the acoustics, she sang a short melody, 4 notes, ascending. The echo returned with a delay of approximately 6 seconds. The notes came back in descending order. Del Rosso, a music teacher with a trained ear, was certain of what she heard. She repeated the test multiple times. Each time, the notes reversed. She documented the experience in a letter to a friend, a physics professor at Reed College. The professor found the account interesting but implausible. "Echoes don't reverse order," he wrote in his reply. "They may overlap or distort, but temporal reversal is not physically possible without a medium that stores and replays sound. No such medium exists in open air." Del Rosso returned to the location in 1993 with a portable cassette recorder. She recorded herself clapping and speaking. When played back, the recording captured both her original sounds and the echoes. The echoes were clearly delayed, far longer than the terrain should allow, and clearly reversed in sequence. She submitted the tape to the Reed College physics professor. He analyzed it and confirmed the reversal, but could offer no explanation. He suggested the tape be reviewed by acoustic specialists. Del Rosso contacted several. None responded with interest. One wrote back briefly, "Likely a recording artifact. Acoustic reversal in natural settings is theoretically impossible." In 1998, a graduate student in environmental science named Rachel Okoro compiled reports of unusual acoustic phenomena in Washington's wilderness areas. She discovered references to the 3 Mount Adams locations in climbing journals, hiking forums, and unpublished field notes. Okoro visited all 3 sites in the summer of 1999. At the first location, the basin Gallo had documented, Okoro confirmed the delayed echo. She used a stopwatch to measure the delay, 4.8 seconds. She clapped in a deliberate rhythm, 3 claps evenly spaced. The echoes returned in reverse order with the same spacing. At the second location, near Hell Roaring Meadow, the delay was 6.2 seconds. The reversal was consistent. At the third location, on Battlement Ridge, the delay was 5.6 seconds. Same reversal. Okoro's thesis, submitted in 2000, included a section titled Anomalous Acoustic Behavior at High Elevation Sites. She documented the locations, measurements, and consistency of the phenomenon. She noted that all 3 sites shared certain characteristics. They were bowl-shaped or semi-enclosed. They were at high elevation, and they were composed primarily of volcanic rock. She proposed no mechanism. "The delays are too long for simple reflection," she wrote. "The reversals are unexplained. Acoustic theory does not account for temporal reordering of sound without a storage medium. No such medium is present." Her thesis advisor encouraged her to revise the section, suggesting the observations were likely measurement errors or misinterpretations of complex acoustic reflections. Okoro refused. The thesis was accepted, but the acoustic section was flagged as speculative in the final review. Okoro submitted an article based on her findings to the Journal of the Acoustical Society of America. It was rejected. The reviewers noted that temporal reversal of acoustic signals in open-air environments is physically implausible, and that the reported phenomena likely result from observational error. Okoro attempted to secure funding for a more comprehensive study, including high-precision recording equipment and acoustic modeling. Her grant applications were denied. She eventually abandoned the research and moved into a different field. In 2007, an amateur researcher named Douglas Fujimoto read Okoro's thesis online and decided to investigate. Fujimoto, a retired electrical engineer, had experience with audio analysis and signal processing. He visited the Battlement Ridge location in August of 2007 with professional-grade recording equipment. His recordings confirmed Okoro's findings. The echoes were delayed far beyond what the terrain justified. The sequence reversal was clear and consistent. Fujimoto analyzed the waveforms. The echoes were not distorted or overlapping. They were discrete, reversed copies of the original sounds. He shared his findings on a personal blog and in online forums dedicated to unexplained phenomena. The response was mixed. Some users expressed interest, others suggested technical explanations, refraction, interference patterns, equipment malfunction. Fujimoto addressed each suggestion. None fit the data. In 2011, Fujimoto returned to all three locations with a colleague, a sound engineer named Harold Morales. They conducted synchronized recordings using identical equipment at multiple positions. The results were consistent across all tests. The delays ranged from 4 to 7 seconds. The reversals occurred in every trial. Morales, skeptical at first, was convinced by the data. "I've worked with acoustics for 30 years, he said in a 2012 interview. "This doesn't make sense. The delays are too long. The reversals shouldn't happen, but they do. I recorded it myself." Fujimoto and Morales compiled their findings into a detailed report and submitted it to the Forest Service, the United States Geological Survey, and several academic institutions. None responded with interest. One USGS geologist replied briefly, stating that acoustic anomalies in mountainous terrain are complex and not typically investigated unless they present safety concerns. No safety concerns were identified. No further investigation was initiated. The three clearings remain accessible. Climbers and hikers occasionally pass through them. Some test the echoes. Most do not notice anything unusual. Sound delay is subtle, easily overlooked. Those who do notice often assume they are mistaken, that the terrain is playing tricks. But the recordings exist. The measurements are documented. And in 3 small clearings in the high country of Mount Adams, sound continues to behave in ways it should not. Clap your hands, and the echo returns long after it should. Speak a sequence, and it comes back reversed. Call out into the empty air, and something, some property of the rock, or the air, or the space itself, chooses which sounds to return first. The clearings are silent now as winter approaches. Snow will cover them soon, filling the basins and muting the world. But in summer, when the snow melts and hikers return, the echoes will be waiting. Patient, reversed, unexplained. Some patterns repeat without explanation. Gifford Pinchot National Forest encompasses 1.3 million acres of mountainous wilderness in southern Washington state. Established in 1908, it is one of the oldest national forests in the United States, named after the first chief of the Forest Service. The terrain varies from dense lowland forests to alpine meadows, from glaciated peaks to volcanic plateaus. The forest contains over 1,000 miles of trails, hundreds of lakes, and dozens of developed campgrounds. During peak season, thousands of visitors camp, hike, and fish within its boundaries. The Forest Service monitors these activities carefully. Permits are required for overnight camping in designated areas. Rangers conduct regular patrols. Fire restrictions are enforced, especially during dry summers. The system is well documented, well managed, and thoroughly mapped. Yet on 4 separate occasions over 36 years, Forest Service personnel have documented 33 campfires burning in locations where no fires should exist. The first incident occurred on the night of August 15, 1978. A wildlife survey team was conducting a nocturnal census of elk populations in the southern section of the forest. The team, led by biologist Margaret Kowalski, was positioned on a ridge overlooking the Cispus River Valley. Their vantage point, at approximately 4,000 feet elevation, provided clear sight lines across miles of forested terrain. The survey required darkness. Kowalski and her 3-person team, technicians named Raymond Holt, Lisa Vasquez, and Samuel Nguyen, used night vision equipment and thermal imaging to locate and count elk herds. The work was methodical, requiring patience and careful observation. At approximately 11:45, Vasquez noticed lights in the valley below, small points of orange scattered across the landscape. She assumed they were campfires from permitted sites. But as she studied them through binoculars, she realized there were too many. Kowalski checked the permit log. On that date, 6 camping permits had been issued for the entire southern district, 3 for developed campgrounds, 3 for backcountry sites. All 6 locations were known and mapped. Kowalski counted the visible fires. 33. The team spent the next hour documenting what they observed. The fires were distributed across an area of roughly 40 square miles. They burned steadily, with no visible movement around them, no headlamps, no flashlights, no indication of human activity. The fires simply burned, scattered through the forest in no apparent pattern. Kowalski's field report, filed on August 17, 1978, described the observation in careful detail. She noted the time, the weather conditions, clear skies, no wind, and the exact number of fires. She recommended a daylight investigation to determine if unreported camping had occurred. Rangers conducted the investigation the following morning. They visited the 6 permitted campsites first. All were occupied as expected. Then they hiked to several of the locations where fires had been observed. They found nothing. No fire rings, no ash, no disturbed ground, no trash, no evidence that anyone had been there. The Rangers expanded their search over the following days, checking additional locations. The results were consistent. No physical evidence of campfires, no abandoned gear, no tracks, nothing. Kowalski's supervisor, a senior ranger named Thomas Gallo, reviewed the report with skepticism. He suggested the team had misidentified natural light sources, perhaps reflections from lakes, or bioluminescent fungi, or equipment malfunction. Kowalski disagreed. The team had used multiple observation methods. The fires were distinct, consistent, and unmistakable. Gallo's response, documented in internal memos, was cautious. Wildlife team reports anomalous light sources during night survey. Ground investigation found no evidence of unauthorized camping or fire activity. Likely observational error or natural phenomenon. No further action recommended. The incident was filed and forgotten. 11 years later, it happened again. On the night of August 14, 1989, a different Forest Service team was conducting a fire watch from a lookout tower on McCoy Peak. The watch was routine. Summer had been dry, and fire danger was high. Lookout staff were required to scan the forest regularly for smoke or flame. At approximately midnight, lookout operator Sandra Pritchard observed multiple fires burning across the forest. She counted them carefully, using a grid map to mark each location. 33 fires. She radioed the ranger station immediately, reporting what appeared to be a coordinated illegal camping event or possible arson. Rangers responded at first light, dispatching teams to the reported locations. As in 1978, they found nothing. No fire rings, no ash, no evidence of human presence. Pritchard was certain of what she had seen. They were campfires, she said in a subsequent interview. Not brush fires, not lightning strikes. Controlled fires burning steadily. I watched them for over an hour. They didn't spread. They didn't move. They just burned. The incident was documented but not publicized. Internal Forest Service memos from that period, later obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request, show that supervisors discussed the possibility of equipment malfunction or atmospheric conditions causing false observations. One memo, dated August 19, 1989, noted second report of multiple unexplained light sources in Southern District. No physical evidence found. Recommend review of observation protocols. No review was conducted. In 2001, the phenomenon occurred for a third time. On the night of August 13th, a backcountry ranger named Michael Delgado was hiking alone through the Indian Heaven Wilderness, conducting a trail condition assessment. At approximately 11:30, he emerged onto a ridge and noticed fires burning below him in the valleys and across distant slopes. Delgado counted 33 fires. He documented their approximate locations in his field notebook, using landmarks and compass bearings. He assumed they were illegal campfires and hiked through the night to investigate the nearest one. He reached the location at dawn. There was nothing there. No fire pit, no burned wood, no disturbance. He checked 3 more locations over the following 2 days. Same result. Delgado's report was filed with the district office. A supervisor noted in the margin, "Third occurrence of this phenomenon. Pattern unclear. Recommend documenting, but no active investigation." The pattern became clear in 2014. On the night of August 12th, a Forest Service fire prevention specialist named Patricia Okoro was conducting a training exercise with a group of seasonal rangers. The exercise involved night navigation and fire detection. The group was positioned on a ridge overlooking the Dark Divide area at approximately 11 o'clock. One of the trainees, a young ranger named Kevin Morales, pointed out fires in the distance. Okoro looked through her binoculars. Multiple fires scattered across the landscape. She asked the trainees to count them independently. All reported the same number, 33. Okoro, familiar with Forest Service history, immediately checked past incident reports. She found references to the 1978, 1989, and 2001 observations. The dates were consistent. Mid-August, always at night, always 33 fires. She documented the observation in detail and submitted her report with a recommendation for further investigation. Her supervisor, a regional fire management officer, reviewed the historical reports and noted the pattern. A memo dated August 18, 2014, stated, "Fourth documented occurrence of unexplained light sources in Southern District. Consistent date range, August 12th through 15th. Consistent count, 33. Consistent lack of physical evidence. Phenomenon appears cyclic but cause unknown." The memo concluded, "No public safety threat identified. Recommend continued documentation if phenomenon recurs." Okoro was not satisfied with the response. She contacted researchers at the University of Washington, describing the pattern. A professor in the Atmospheric Sciences Department suggested ball lightning or similar rare meteorological events. Okoro found the explanation unconvincing. Ball lightning does not occur in multiples of 33. It does not repeat on a predictable cycle. She independently researched the locations where fires had been observed. Using GPS coordinates from the various reports, she created a map. The 33 points were scattered, but not random. When connected, they formed no recognizable pattern, no geometric shape, no alignment with trails or roads or geographic features. Yet the points were consistent across all 4 observations. The fires burned in the same locations, separated by years, always on the same August nights. Okoro contacted local indigenous communities asking if there was any cultural or historical significance to those specific locations or dates. An elder from the Cowlitz tribe, speaking off the record, mentioned that mid-August had traditionally been a time of gathering and ceremony, but declined to elaborate. The elder added, "Some fires are not meant to be seen." When asked what that meant, the elder said nothing further. No official investigation has been conducted. The Forest Service continues to document the observations, but has not allocated resources to study the phenomenon. Internal communications suggest a preference for avoiding publicity. A 2015 email between regional administrators, obtained through public records request, included this passage: "The fire observations generate questions we cannot answer. Until we have a plausible explanation, it is better not to draw attention to the matter." The next occurrence, if the pattern holds, would be expected in August of 2026, 12 years after the last observation, 11 years after the one before that, 13 years before that. The intervals are not consistent. The locations are. The number is. And somewhere in the archives of the Gifford Pinchot National Forest, there is a map with 33 points marked in red. Points where fires burn on certain August nights, visible from ridges and lookout towers, recorded by rangers and biologists and lookout operators who cannot explain what they saw. The fires leave no trace. They do not spread. They do not smoke. They simply burn, 33 of them, scattered across the forest in places no one camps, in numbers that defy coincidence. And in 12 years, someone will stand on a ridge in the darkness and count them again. 33 fires, always 33, burning in the silence, waiting to be seen. Some caves do not simply exist, they breathe. The southern slope of Mount Adams in the Gifford Pinchot National Forest is riddled with lava tubes formed during volcanic eruptions thousands of years ago. These tubes are geological artifacts, hollow channels created when the outer surface of flowing lava cooled and hardened, while the molten interior drained away. Most are small, unstable, and of little interest beyond their basic formation. A few, like the well-known Guler Ice Cave, attract spelunkers and geologists due to unique features: ice formations, unusual mineral deposits, or exceptional preservation. 3/4 of a mile northwest of Guler Ice Cave, at an elevation of 3,100 feet, there exists a lava tube that appears on no tourist maps. It has no official name. Forest Service records from the 1970s reference it only as Site 14-B, a designation used internally for minor geological features not deemed significant enough for public documentation. The entrance is unremarkable, a vertical shaft approximately 4 feet in diameter, partially obscured by Douglas fir roots and volcanic rubble. The opening descends at a steep angle for roughly 30 feet, before leveling into a horizontal passage. The tube extends an estimated 200 feet into the mountainside, though no complete survey has ever been published. What makes this particular cave notable is not its size or structure. It is the air. The phenomenon was first documented in July of 1976 by a recreational caving group from Portland, Oregon. The group, led by an experienced spelunker named Thomas Kelleher, was exploring lesser-known lava tubes in the Mount Adams area. They descended into the unnamed tube on July 18th, intending to map its interior and assess its stability. Within minutes of entering, Kelleher noticed air movement. Caves naturally experience airflow due to temperature differentials and barometric pressure changes, but this was different. The air moved in pulses, warm exhalations from deeper in the cave, followed by brief pauses, then another exhalation. The rhythm was consistent, measurable. Kelleher timed the pulses using his wristwatch. 41 seconds between each exhalation. No variation. The air was noticeably warm, approximately 15 degrees warmer than the ambient cave temperature, and carried a faint mineral smell, sulfurous but not overwhelming. The group explored approximately 150 feet into the tube before the passage narrowed. The air pulses continued throughout, growing slightly stronger in intensity as they went deeper. Kelleher noted the phenomenon in his field journal, but attributed it to geothermal activity or subsurface ventilation. The group exited without incident and continued exploring other caves in the area. Kelleher mentioned the breathing cave to colleagues over the following months. In 1977, he returned with a more technical focus, bringing a thermometer, an anemometer to measure airflow, and a stopwatch. The results confirmed his initial observations. The cave exhaled warm air in precise 41-second intervals. The air temperature at the entrance was 68 degrees Fahrenheit. The exhaled air was 83 degrees. The flow rate was modest but measurable, approximately 0.5 meters per second during exhalations. Most unsettling, the rhythm matched human respiration at rest. 41 seconds is unusually slow for human breathing, but within the range of deep meditative breathing patterns. Kelleher noted this in his report, but offered no speculation. He submitted his findings to the Forest Service as part of a broader survey of volcanic features in the Mount Adams region. The Forest Service acknowledged receipt of the report. No follow-up study was initiated. In August of 1981, a group of 3 spelunkers from the University of Washington Geology Department visited the cave as part of a research project on volcanic tube formations. The team included a graduate student named Sandra Brennan, a faculty advisor named Dr. Raymond Okoro, and a field technician named Michael Vasquez. Brennan had read Kelleher's report and was skeptical. Rhythmic airflow in caves, she believed, could be explained by tidal barometric effects or complex ventilation networks. She brought equipment to measure air pressure, temperature, and gas composition, intending to document a natural but unremarkable phenomenon. The team descended into the cave at approximately 10 in the morning. They confirmed the 41-second rhythm immediately. Brennan set up her instruments near the entrance, recording data over a 30-minute period. The exhalations were metronomic, no variation in timing, no fluctuation in temperature. As the team ventured deeper, Brennan noticed something Kelleher had not mentioned. The rhythm changed, not the temperature, not the intensity, the frequency. At 100 feet into the tube, the interval between exhalations was 38 seconds. At 150 feet, it was 35 seconds. The cave was breathing faster. Vasquez, monitoring a handheld thermometer, reported that the exhaled air temperature was also increasing. 86 degrees at 100 feet, 90 degrees at 150 feet. Dr. Okoro suggested they proceed cautiously. Increased temperature could indicate proximity to an active geothermal vent or unstable volcanic activity. At approximately 180 feet, the passage narrowed to less than 2 feet in diameter. The breathing rhythm had accelerated to 32 seconds. The air was uncomfortably warm. Brennan described it later as oppressive, not just heat, but pressure, like standing too close to someone. Dr. Okoro made the decision to retreat. As the team withdrew, Brennan continued timing the exhalations. The rhythm slowed as they moved toward the entrance, returning to 41 seconds by the time they exited. Brennan's field notes from that day include a passage that was not included in her official report. The cave responds to presence. Airflow accelerates with depth and proximity. No geological mechanism accounts for this. Recommend immediate review by geothermal specialists. Her official report, submitted to the university in September 1981, was more restrained. It documented the rhythmic airflow, the temperature gradient, and the frequency change with depth. It recommended further study, but offered no conclusions. Dr. Okoro, in a separate memo to the Forest Service, was more direct. The phenomenon warrants investigation, he wrote. The airflow pattern is consistent and anomalous. We cannot explain the rhythmic precision or the frequency variation. Request permission for extended monitoring. The Forest Service response, dated October 1981, stated that the site would be reviewed for potential geothermal hazards. No timeline was provided. In 1982, Kelleher returned to the cave with a small team, intending to explore beyond the narrow section that had stopped Brennan's group. Kelleher was experienced in tight passages and confident he could navigate further. The group descended in April during a period of stable weather. Kelleher entered the narrow section alone, leaving his companions at the 150-foot mark. He reported via radio that the passage continued for at least another 50 feet, widening slightly before descending sharply. The breathing rhythm, he said, had accelerated to approximately 28 seconds. The temperature was difficult to estimate, but felt above 95 degrees. He proceeded for another 20 feet, then stopped. In his radio transmission, later transcribed from a recording made by one of his companions, Kelleher said, "It's getting faster. I can feel it. The air is pushing out harder. I'm coming back." He exited without incident, but described the experience as deeply unnerving. "It felt reactive," he said in a later interview, "like I was disturbing something. The faster I moved, the faster it breathed." Kelleher submitted a detailed report to the Forest Service in May 1982, reiterating his recommendation for a formal geothermal assessment. The response, dated June 1982, thanked him for his report and stated that the matter was under review. In 1983, a Forest Service geologist named Patricia Del Rosso was assigned to conduct a preliminary assessment of the site. Del Rosso spent 2 days in the area, examining the cave entrance, reviewing previous reports, and taking basic measurements. Her findings were consistent with prior observations: rhythmic airflow, elevated temperature, frequency variation with depth. Del Rosso's report, completed in August 1983, noted that the cave did not exhibit typical signs of active geothermal venting. There was no steam, no sulfuric gas concentration, no ground heating in the surrounding area. The airflow was warm, but not dangerously hot. She recommended that the cave be monitored, but saw no immediate safety concern. Her report included a single sentence that was later redacted from publicly available versions. The rhythmic consistency suggests a pressure-regulated system, but no such system has been identified. In March of 1984, the Forest Service quietly closed public access to the cave. No signs were posted, no announcements were made. The cave was simply removed from internal maps and excluded from recreational caving guides. When asked about the closure, a regional spokesperson stated that the decision was made due to safety concerns related to unstable volcanic features. No further details were provided. No geothermal hazard assessment was ever published. Kelleher attempted to obtain more information through Freedom of Information Act requests in 1986. He received heavily redacted documents that confirmed the closure but offered no explanation. One memo, dated February 1984, stated, Site 14-B to be restricted indefinitely. Public inquiries to be referred to regional office. No additional surveys authorized. Kelleher contacted Dr. Okoro and Brennan seeking their support in pushing for transparency. Both declined. Okoro had retired. Brennan had moved into a different field of study. Neither wished to pursue the matter further. In a 2009 interview, Brennan was asked why she had not continued investigating the cave. She paused for a long time before answering. Some things don't want to be understood, she said. That cave wasn't just moving air. It was responding, and I didn't want to know what it was responding to. The cave remains closed. The entrance is still accessible to anyone willing to hike off-trail, though few know it exists. Occasional explorers report the same phenomenon: rhythmic exhalations, warm air, accelerating frequency with depth. And at night, when the forest is still and quiet, those who camp nearby sometimes report hearing it, a low rhythmic sound, like breath moving through stone. 41 seconds between each pulse, steady, unending breathing. Some things refuse to stay where they are placed. The Lewis River Trail runs for 14.7 miles through the southwestern section of Gifford Pinchot National Forest, following the course of the Lewis River from its lower falls to the upper Cascades. Established in the 1930s by the Civilian Conservation Corps, the trail is one of the most popular hiking routes in southern Washington, offering access to waterfalls, old-growth forest, and relatively gentle terrain suitable for families and casual hikers. The Forest Service maintains the trail carefully, clearing fallen trees, repairing bridges, and marking the route with standardized orange metal diamonds nailed to trees at regular intervals. Trail markers are essential infrastructure. They guide hikers, especially in areas where the path becomes indistinct or crosses rocky sections where tread is not visible. The markers are numbered sequentially and positioned according to Forest Service protocol, typically at eye level, spaced every 100 to 300 feet, depending on terrain visibility. Each marker is secured with 2 galvanized nails driven deep into the bark. They are designed to remain in place for years, weathering storms and seasonal changes without issue. On the Lewis River Trail, they do not stay in place. The anomaly was first documented in May of 2006. A trail maintenance crew, led by Ranger Michael Kowalski, was conducting a seasonal inspection, checking for winter damage and replacing worn signage. As the crew progressed along the trail, Kowalski noticed something unusual. Several orange markers were missing from their designated trees. This was not uncommon. Vandalism, wildlife, and weather occasionally dislodge markers. But as Kowalski searched the area, he found the markers. They were 30 feet off the trail, nailed to different trees, at the same height and orientation as they had been originally. Kowalski assumed teenagers or pranksters had relocated them. He removed the markers from the incorrect trees and reinstalled them in their proper positions. The crew completed the inspection and filed a routine maintenance report, noting minor vandalism. 3 weeks later, Kowalski received a call from a hiker who had become disoriented on the Lewis River Trail. The hiker reported that trail markers seemed to be in the wrong locations, leading into the forest rather than along the established path. Kowalski returned to investigate. The markers he had reinstalled were gone from their correct positions. He found them 30 feet off the trail on different trees, exactly where he had found them before. This time, Kowalski documented the incident more carefully. He photographed the relocated markers, noted their GPS coordinates, and checked for footprints or other signs of human activity. He found nothing. The ground around the trees showed no disturbance. The nail holes in the original trees remained empty, showing no signs of recent removal. No fresh wood, no bark damage consistent with someone prying the markers free. Kowalski's report, filed in June 2006, described the incident as possible repeated vandalism and recommended increased patrols. The Forest Service responded with a standard letter acknowledging the report. No additional patrols were assigned. Over the following months, the pattern continued. Rangers would replace the markers. Within days or weeks, they would be found relocated, always 30 feet from the trail, always on different trees, always at the same height. The precision was unsettling. 30 feet, measured from the trail edge to the relocated marker, varied by no more than 18 inches in any instance. In 2007, Ranger Sandra Vasquez took a particular interest in the phenomenon. Vasquez had worked on the Lewis River Trail for 5 years and considered the relocations a personal challenge. She developed a system. She replaced markers using extra long nails, applied industrial adhesive to the nail heads, and marked each tree with a small, hidden paint dot to verify if the same marker was being moved or if new ones were appearing. The markers moved anyway. The nails were intact, not pulled out, but nailed into different trees. The paint dots remained on the original trees, empty of markers. Vasquez found the relocated markers on new trees, with no paint dots, nailed securely, as if they had been there all along. Vasquez began replacing the markers weekly, documenting each instance. By the end of the summer, she had recorded 18 separate relocations. The pattern never varied. 30 feet, different trees, same height. In August 2007, Vasquez consulted with a wildlife biologist to determine if animals could be responsible. Bears occasionally interact with human infrastructure, but removing and relocating nailed metal markers would require dexterity and intent beyond any known animal behavior. The biologist found the scenario implausible. Animals destroy things, he said. They don't relocate them with precision. Vasquez's reports grew more detailed and more frustrated. In a memo dated September 2007, she wrote, "The markers are being moved by someone or something with specific intent. The 30-foot distance is deliberate. The relocations occurred despite our efforts to secure them. Recommend surveillance." Her supervisor approved the installation of a motion-activated trail camera in October 2007. The camera was positioned to monitor a section where markers had been repeatedly relocated. It was set to capture both still images and short video clips whenever motion was detected. The camera recorded deer, hikers, and small mammals. No humans approaching the markers. No evidence of tampering. Yet the markers continued to move. In 2009, the Forest Service replaced the entire set of markers along the Lewis River Trail with a new, more secure design: thicker metal, longer nails, tamper-resistant fasteners. Within a month, 12 of the new markers had been relocated. Same distance, same precision. A ranger named Thomas Brennan, assigned to the trail in 2010, decided to test a theory. He installed a marker and attached a small GPS tracker to the back, hidden beneath the metal. If the marker moved, the GPS would record the exact time and path of relocation. The GPS tracker was found 3 weeks later, 30 feet off the trail, still attached to the marker. The data log showed no movement, no gradual shift, no path of travel. The tracker's position simply changed at 2:34 a.m. on a Thursday morning. One moment it was on the trail, the next moment it was 30 feet away. Brennan reviewed the data multiple times. "It's like it teleported," he said in an interview years later. "There's no record of movement between the two positions, just a jump." The most disturbing evidence came in 2012. Ranger Patricia Okoro installed a high-resolution motion-activated camera with infrared night vision, positioned to monitor a marker that had been relocated 7 times. The camera was secured to a tree with a clear view of both the marker and the surrounding area. On the night of July 23, 2012, the camera captured footage. The timestamp showed 3:47 a.m. The video shows the trail marker clearly visible on its tree, secured with nails. The forest is dark, illuminated only by the camera's infrared LEDs. For 11 seconds, nothing moves. Then, in a single frame, the marker is gone from the tree. The camera pans slightly, an automatic adjustment triggered by motion detection, and captures the marker on a different tree 30 feet to the left. It is fully secured, nails in place, as if it had always been there. There is no figure in the frame, no hand, no tool, no movement between the positions. The marker simply exists in one location, then exists in another. Okoro reviewed the footage dozens of times. She brought in a video forensics expert from a local university. The expert confirmed the footage was not edited or tampered with. "It's a continuous recording," the expert said. "No cuts, no splices. What you see is what the camera captured." The Forest Service classified the footage as equipment malfunction and declined to pursue further analysis. Okoro disagreed. She submitted a formal request for a comprehensive investigation, including additional cameras, expert consultation, and extended monitoring. The request was denied. A memo from the regional office, dated August 2012, stated, "Trail marker relocations do not constitute a public safety issue. Continue standard maintenance protocols." Okoro resigned from the Forest Service in 2013. In a letter to a colleague obtained years later, she wrote, "I can't work in a place that ignores reality. Those markers are being moved by something we don't understand, and no one wants to acknowledge it. The relocations continue. Rangers still replace markers on the Lewis River Trail. Hikers still report finding markers in incorrect positions, leading into the forest rather than along the path. Maintenance logs document dozens of relocations each year. In 2018, the Forest Service quietly adjusted their protocol. Rather than fighting the relocations, they began placing additional markers, redundant markers to ensure the trail remains adequately signed, even when some are relocated. The adjusted protocol is not mentioned in public-facing documents. It exists only in internal maintenance guidelines. A retired ranger, speaking anonymously in 2020, described the unspoken understanding among trail staff. "Everyone knows about it," he said. "You just don't talk about it. You replace the markers when they move. You document it in the logs, and you don't ask questions you won't get answers to." Local hikers have developed their own folklore around the markers. Some call them the wandering signs. Others joke about a forest spirit that doesn't like the trail where it is. But those who have worked on the trail, who have replaced the markers week after week and watched them disappear, do not joke. The footage from 2012 still exists, archived in Forest Service files. A marker on a tree. Then gone. Then on another tree 30 feet away. 11 seconds. No hands, no tools, no explanation. And every few weeks, a ranger walks the Lewis River Trail with a bag of orange markers and a hammer, replacing the ones that have moved. They nail them in carefully, securing them to the correct trees, knowing they will move again. 30 feet. Always 30 feet, into the forest where no trail goes. There are places where living things forget how to make sound. Mosquito Lake sits at an elevation of 5,200 feet in the Indian Heaven Wilderness, a protected area within Gifford Pinchot National Forest. The wilderness encompasses 20,000 acres of subalpine terrain, dense forests of mountain hemlock and noble fir. open meadows dotted with wildflowers, and over 150 small lakes formed in volcanic craters and glacial depressions. The region is geologically young, shaped by volcanic activity within the last 10,000 years. The lakes themselves are shallow, typically less than 20 feet deep, and surrounded by marshy shores, thick with sedges and rushes. The area is rich with wildlife. Black-tailed deer, black bears, and Roosevelt elk move through the forests. Smaller mammals, chipmunks, marmots, pikas, are abundant. The lakes support populations of cutthroat trout and provide habitat for amphibians. Most notably, the area is home to diverse bird species: gray jays, mountain chickadees, dark-eyed juncos, red-breasted nuthatches, and numerous warblers and sparrows. Ornithologists consider Indian Heaven an excellent location for bird observation, particularly during spring and fall migrations, except for one specific area, a 3-acre section approximately half a mile northwest of the largest mosquito lake, where no birds sing. The anomaly was first noted informally in the early 1990s. Hikers occasionally mentioned it in trail logs and journals, comments about an unusually quiet stretch of forest, a place where the usual ambient noise seemed absent. These mentions were sporadic and vague. Most assumed the silence was temporary, a coincidence of timing or weather. The first formal documentation came in July of 1995. A naturalist named Gifford Pinchot was conducting a bird survey for the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. Pinchot spent 3 weeks hiking through Indian Heaven, documenting species, estimating populations, and recording bird calls. On July 18th, he entered the area near Mosquito Lakes and noticed an abrupt change in acoustic environment. The forest had been filled with bird calls moments before: chickadees chattering, juncos singing, the distant hammering of a woodpecker. Then, as Pinchot crossed into a particular section of forest, the sounds stopped. Not gradually, instantly. He stood still, listening. He could hear wind in the trees. He could hear his own breathing, his footsteps on the forest floor. But no birds. Pinchot continued through the area. He saw birds, juncos flitting through the underbrush, a jay perched on a branch 30 feet away. But they made no sound. The jay opened its beak as if calling, but Pinchot heard nothing. After approximately 10 minutes of walking, he emerged from the silent section. Bird calls resumed immediately, as if he had crossed an invisible threshold. Pinchot documented the experience in his field notes. He returned to the area the following day, approaching from a different direction. The silence was consistent. He marked the boundaries by walking the perimeter and noting landmarks. The silent zone was roughly circular, encompassing approximately 3 acres. His report, submitted in August 1995, included a section titled "Acoustic Anomaly Near Mosquito Lakes." He described the silence, noted the visible presence of birds, and recommended follow-up investigation. The Department of Fish and Wildlife acknowledged the report but did not initiate further study. Over the next decade, other hikers and naturalists encountered the silent zone. Reports were sporadic and informal, posts on hiking forums, mentions in wilderness blogs. A birdwatcher named Sandra Delgado described her experience in a 2002 online journal. "We were hiking past Mosquito Lakes and suddenly realized we couldn't hear anything. Birds everywhere, but completely silent. It was deeply unsettling. We didn't stay long." In 2007, a graduate student in ecology at Washington State University named Michael Vasquez read about the phenomenon and decided to investigate. Vasquez had access to professional audio recording equipment and was trained in acoustic ecology, the study of sound in natural environments. He received approval to conduct fieldwork in Indian Heaven Wilderness and visited the site in August 2007. Vasquez spent 4 days in the area, deploying multiple recording devices at various locations. He positioned microphones inside the silent zone, just outside its boundaries, and at control sites several hundred yards away. The equipment recorded continuously for 72 hours. The results confirmed the anomaly. Recordings from outside the silent zone captured typical forest sounds: bird calls, insect buzzing, small mammals rustling through undergrowth. Recordings from inside the zone captured wind, vegetation movement, and occasional footsteps from Vasquez himself. No animal vocalizations, no bird calls, no insect sounds. Vasquez analyzed the recordings using spectral analysis software, searching for sounds outside the range of human hearing. He found nothing. The silence extended across all frequencies. Most troubling, Vasquez documented birds visibly present within the silent zone. He observed juncos, chickadees, and jays moving through the area. He watched a gray jay land on a branch 15 feet from one of his microphones. The bird opened its beak repeatedly, displaying the physical behavior associated with calling, but the recording captured nothing. Vasquez returned to the university with his data and presented his findings to his thesis advisor, Dr. Patricia Okoro, a professor specializing in animal behavior. Dr. Okoro reviewed the recordings and fieldwork documentation. She was skeptical at first, suggesting equipment malfunction or user error. Vasquez offered to return with her to replicate the study. In September 2007, Dr. Okoro accompanied Vasquez to the site. They brought additional recording equipment, multiple microphones, and redundant systems to eliminate the possibility of technical failure. They spent 3 days recording. The results were identical. Silence within the zone, normal sounds outside it. Dr. Okoro observed the same phenomenon Vasquez had documented, birds present but silent. She noted it in her field journal. Observed approximately 15 individual birds during 6-hour observation period. All exhibited normal physical behavior: foraging, perching, preening. Several opened beaks as if vocalizing. No sound recorded or heard. In 2008, Dr. Okoro secured funding for a more comprehensive study. She assembled a team of 3 researchers and returned to the site in June. The team deployed 8 high-quality recording systems positioned in a grid pattern across and around the silent zone. They recorded for 10 days, accumulating over 40 hours of audio data. The study confirmed everything prior observations had documented. The recordings from within the silent zone contained only ambient noise, wind, rain on one occasion, and the sounds of researchers moving through the area, no animal vocalizations. Birds were present, observed visually, but produced no sound within the boundaries. Dr. Okoro's research paper, submitted to the Journal of Acoustic Ecology in 2009, detailed the findings. She documented the precise boundaries of the silent zone, provided spectral analysis of the recordings, and offered several potential explanations, none of which were satisfactory. One hypothesis suggested acoustic absorption, some property of the terrain or vegetation that absorbed sound before it could propagate. But this did not explain why human voices and footsteps remained audible while animal vocalizations did not. It also did not explain the sharp boundary. Sound absorption should create a gradient, not an abrupt transition. Another hypothesis involved electromagnetic interference affecting animal nervous systems, preventing vocalization. But electromagnetic surveys conducted by a university physics department found no anomalies in the area. Magnetic fields, radio frequencies, and electrical activity were all within normal ranges. A third hypothesis suggested a learned avoidance behavior, animals recognizing the area as dangerous and remaining silent as a survival strategy. But this did not explain why birds flew through the zone regularly, why they exhibited normal behaviors aside from vocalization, or why insects, which do not exhibit learned silence, were also absent. The paper concluded, "The silent zone near Mosquito Lakes represents an unexplained acoustic phenomenon. Animal life is present but does not produce vocalizations within defined boundaries. No known physical or biological mechanism accounts for the observed pattern. The journal rejected the paper. Reviewers stated that the findings were implausible without a clear physical mechanism, and suggested that the observations likely resulted from methodological flaws or incomplete data collection. Dr. Okoro appealed the decision, providing additional documentation and offering to facilitate independent verification. The appeal was denied. Frustrated, Dr. Okoro submitted the paper to 2 additional journals. Both rejected it. One reviewer wrote, "The described phenomenon contradicts established principles of acoustic ecology and animal behavior." Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, which this study does not provide. Dr. Okoro did not pursue further publication. She later told a colleague, in a conversation recorded in a 2011 interview, "I know what we documented, I know what we heard, or didn't hear, but the scientific community isn't interested in phenomena it can't explain." The Forest Service was contacted about the silent zone in 2010. A concerned hiker, after reading about the research online, submitted a formal inquiry asking if the area posed any environmental or health risks. The Forest Service response, dated March 2010, stated, "The area near Mosquito Lakes is a natural wilderness environment. Variations in wildlife behavior and ambient sound are normal and do not indicate hazards." No further investigation by federal agencies was initiated. In 2015, an independent filmmaker named Thomas Brennan visited the site to document the phenomenon for a short film about unexplained natural mysteries. Brennan brought professional audio and video equipment. His footage clearly shows birds, juncos, and chickadees moving through the area, opening their beaks, displaying physical behaviors consistent with calling. The audio track captures nothing from the birds. Only wind. Only Brennan's narration. Brennan interviewed Dr. Okoro for the film. She described the research process and reiterated that the phenomenon remained unexplained. When asked if she had any theories, she shook her head. "I've stopped trying to explain it," she said. "Some things just are." The silent zone remains. Hikers occasionally stumble upon it and mention the experience in online forums. Some describe it as peaceful. Others find it deeply unsettling, a wrongness they cannot articulate, a sense that the forest is holding its breath. The boundaries have not changed. The silence persists. Birds fly through, foraging and moving along migration routes. They land on branches. They open their beaks. And nothing comes out. Somewhere in the archives of Washington State University, there are 40 hours of recordings, wind moving through trees, rain falling on leaves, footsteps crunching on forest trails, and in the background, barely visible in some of the video footage, small birds perched and singing in absolute silence, their throats moving, their bodies responding to instincts millions of years old, calling to mates and rivals and the world around them. But the forest does not carry their voices, and no one knows why. Some surfaces refuse to dry. Peterson Ridge rises to an elevation of 5,400 feet in the eastern section of Gifford Pinchot National Forest, approximately 8 miles northwest of the town of Trout Lake, Washington. The ridge is part of the volcanic landscape that defines this region of the Southern Cascades, basalt formations, ancient lava flows, and scattered volcanic boulders deposited during eruptions thousands of years ago. The terrain is typical of high-elevation forests in the Pacific Northwest. Dense stands of mountain hemlock and subalpine fir, interspersed with rocky clearings and meadows that bloom with lupine and paintbrush in summer. The ridge sees moderate recreational use. Day hikers seeking views of Mount Adams, occasional hunters during fall seasons, and backcountry skiers in winter. The Forest Service maintains one trail that crosses the ridge, but much of the area remains roadless and relatively untraveled. It is quiet country, isolated, the kind of place where weather changes quickly and fog settles without warning. Near the western slope of the ridge, in a clearing approximately 200 feet from the main trail, there exists a formation of 7 boulders. They are volcanic in origin, dark gray basalt, weathered and lichen-covered, each roughly 4 to 6 feet in diameter. The boulders are arranged in a rough circle with an open space of perhaps 15 feet in the center. The arrangement appears natural, though the spacing is unusually regular. Geologists who have examined the site suggest the boulders were deposited during glacial retreat or volcanic activity, then shifted over time by freeze-thaw cycles and erosion. What makes these boulders remarkable is not their arrangement. It is the fact that they are always wet. The phenomenon was first documented in August of 1993. A geology student from Portland State University named Rachel Nguyen was conducting fieldwork in the area, mapping volcanic rock formations for her thesis. Nguyen came across the boulder circle while surveying off-trail. She noted the dampness immediately. Each boulder's surface was slick with moisture, despite the fact that the surrounding area was dry. It had not rained in over 2 weeks. The forest floor was dusty. Other rocks in the area showed no moisture. Nguyen touched one of the boulders. The surface was cool and wet, like stone after a light rain. She examined the other 6. All were identical, damp, cool, with moisture visible as a thin sheen across the entire exposed surface. She checked the ground around the boulders. Dry, no pooling water, no obvious source of moisture. Nguyen documented the observation in her field notes, but attributed it to some localized phenomenon, perhaps underground seepage or a microclimate effect. She collected rock samples and moved on. When she returned 2 days later to photograph the site, the boulders were still wet. Her thesis, completed in 1994, included a brief mention of the damp boulders, noting them as a possible localized moisture retention anomaly. No follow-up investigation was suggested. The site remained unremarkable until 2001, when a Forest Service ranger named Thomas Gallo encountered the boulders during a routine patrol. Gallo had worked in the Gifford Pinchot for 15 years and was familiar with the terrain. He noticed the wet boulders and, like Nguyen, assumed recent rainfall. But he checked his weather log. No precipitation in 12 days. The boulders were soaked. Gallo returned to the site a week later, still wet. He returned again in September after a particularly dry month. The surrounding forest was tinder dry, fire danger at extreme levels. The boulders remained damp. Gallo filed a brief report with the district office describing the boulders and requesting a hydrologist's assessment. The report was acknowledged but not prioritized. Gallo followed up twice over the following year. No response. In 2003, Gallo mentioned the wet boulders to a visiting geologist from the United States Geological Survey. The geologist, Dr. William Kowalski, was in the area conducting volcanic hazard assessments and agreed to visit the site out of curiosity. Kowalski examined the boulders in July 2003 during one of the driest summers on record. The boulders were wet. Kowalski measured the moisture with a handheld hygrometer. The surface humidity was near 100%. He touched the stones and confirmed the presence of liquid. He collected samples of the moisture using sterile vials and absorbent pads. Back at his lab, Kowalski analyzed the samples. The liquid appeared to be water. No unusual chemical composition, no dissolved minerals, no organic contaminants. But it exhibited one peculiar property. It evaporated rapidly at room temperature, faster than normal water, and left no residue. When Kowalski attempted to collect larger quantities by pressing absorbent cloths against the boulders, the moisture would soak into the fabric, but then disappear within minutes of removal, leaving the cloth dry. Kowalski returned to the site in August with more sophisticated equipment. He drilled small core samples from one of the boulders to examine internal moisture content. The cores were dry. The moisture existed only on the surface. He set up a tarp over one boulder to prevent dew formation overnight. The next morning, the boulder beneath the tarp was still wet. The tarp itself was dry. Kowalski's field report, completed in September 2003, documented his findings but offered no conclusions. The boulders exhibit persistent surface moisture from an unidentified source, he wrote. The moisture is chemically consistent with the water, but does not behave as expected. No obvious hydrological or atmospheric mechanism accounts for the phenomenon. The report was filed with the USGS Regional Office, Kowalski recommended. Kowalski further study, including long-term monitoring and isotopic analysis to determine the water's origin. No follow-up was initiated. Kowalski later explained, in a 2010 interview, that his superiors considered the matter scientifically trivial. It was just wet rocks, he said. They didn't see the point of dedicating resources to it. In 2006, a hiker named Sandra Brennan stumbled upon the boulders while backpacking in the area. Brennan, an amateur naturalist, was immediately intrigued. She spent an afternoon examining the stones, taking photographs, and documenting her observations in a journal. She noted that the wetness seemed uniform across all 7 boulders, that no nearby rocks exhibited the same property, and that the air around the boulders felt noticeably cooler. Brennan returned to the site in 2007 with a friend, a chemist named Michael Delgado. They brought equipment to test the moisture, pH strips, conductivity meters, and collection vials. The moisture tested as neutral pH, low conductivity, consistent with distilled water. Delgado attempted to measure the rate of moisture production by sealing a plastic bag around a section of one boulder. After 6 hours, the bag contained no accumulated water. The boulder's surface remained wet, but no moisture collected. "It's like the water exists on the surface but doesn't come from anywhere," Delgado said in a 2008 blog post documenting the visit. "And it doesn't go anywhere either. It just is." Brennan and Delgado contacted local universities, offering to facilitate research access to the site. A professor from the University of Washington Department of Earth and Space Sciences expressed interest and visited in 2009. The professor, Dr. Patricia Okoro, conducted a brief survey and took additional samples. Her analysis confirmed Kowalski's findings. The moisture was water, or something chemically indistinguishable from water, but its behavior was anomalous. Dr. Okoro proposed a hypothesis. The boulders might be porous at a microscopic level, allowing water from underground sources to wick to the surface through capillary action. To test this, she arranged for a ground-penetrating radar survey of the area in 2010. The survey found no underground water sources, no aquifers, no features that would explain sustained moisture delivery to the surface. Dr. Okoro's research proposal, submitted for funding in 2011, was rejected. The review panel noted that, while the phenomenon is curious, it does not appear to have broader scientific or practical significance. Dr. Okoro did not pursue the matter further. Local knowledge of the wet boulders is minimal. A retired logger named Frank Vasquez, who worked in the area during the 1970s and 80s, recalled hearing about the stones from a Yakima elder he had worked with. He said those rocks were crying, Vasquez recalled, in a 2013 interview. "I asked him why, and he just shook his head, said some things cry without reason. I thought he was being poetic. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't." Attempts to verify this account with Yakima tribal historians produced no additional information. One elder, speaking off the record in 2015, acknowledged that certain places in the forest were considered significant but declined to provide specifics. "Not all knowledge is meant to be shared," the elder said. The boulders remain wet. Hikers occasionally find them and mention the oddity in online forums or trail reports. Some touch the stones, marveling at the coolness and persistent dampness. Others feel unsettled and leave quickly. In 2018, a photographer named Kevin Morales visited the site to document the boulders for a series on unexplained natural phenomena. He set up a time-lapse camera to capture changes over 24 hours. The footage shows the boulders in daylight, in twilight, in darkness. Their surfaces glisten consistently. No visible moisture forms, no dripping, no condensation. Just a perpetual wetness, as if the stones are sweating something that isn't quite sweat. Morales described the experience as deeply uncomfortable. "You expect things to make sense," he said in a 2019 podcast interview. "Wet rocks after rain, sure. Wet rocks near a stream, fine. But wet rocks in the middle of dry forest, wet all the time, for no reason? It feels wrong, like the rocks are doing something they shouldn't be able to do." The Forest Service has no official position on the wet boulders. The site is not marked on maps. No signs indicate its presence. When asked about the phenomenon, a regional spokesperson in 2020 stated, "We are aware of various natural features in the Gifford Pinchot that attract public interest. Moisture retention in porous volcanic rock can occur due to a variety of factors." No factors were specified. The 7 boulders sit in their clearing, arranged in a circle that may be natural or may not be. The forest around them is dry in summer, frozen in winter. Rain comes and goes. Droughts pass. Seasons change. And the stones remain wet. Always wet. Cool to the touch. Glistening in sunlight, in moonlight, in the gray light of overcast days. No one knows why. No one has proven where the moisture comes from, or what it is, or why it refuses to dry. Just 7 stones, weeping something that looks like water, but might not be water at all. Weeping without reason, without source, without end. Some places return your gaze. Sheep Canyon lies at an elevation of 4,800 feet in the southern reaches of Gifford Pinchot National Forest, carved by glacial melt during the last ice age. The canyon runs north to south for approximately 2 miles, narrow and steep-walled, with a small creek running through its center. Dense forest, Douglas fir, western hemlock, and cedar blankets the slopes, while the canyon floor opens into a series of small meadows separated by bands of alder and willow. The largest of these meadows, roughly 5 acres in size, sits at the midpoint of the canyon. The area has been accessible since the 1930s, when the Civilian Conservation Corps cut trails through this section of forest. The Sheep Canyon Trail is moderate in difficulty, popular with day hikers and backpackers seeking a quiet alternative to more crowded routes. The Forest Service maintains the trail but provides minimal infrastructure. No developed campsites, no signage beyond basic directional markers. The meadow at the canyon center is pleasant in appearance. Grass and wildflowers in summer, snow-covered in winter. Deer frequent the area. Birds nest in the surrounding trees. From a distance, it looks like dozens of other subalpine meadows scattered throughout the Cascades. But hikers who cross it rarely feel alone. The first documented mention of the sensation appears in a trail log entry from July 19, 1998. A hiker named Kevin Pritchard wrote, "Beautiful meadow at mile 4. Couldn't shake the feeling of being watched the entire time. No wildlife visible. Moved through quickly." Similar entries appear sporadically over the following years. Most are brief, a sentence or two acknowledging discomfort, unease, or the sense of observation. In 2002, a backpacker named Sandra Vasquez wrote, "Stopped for lunch in the meadow, had to leave, felt like something in the trees was staring, Couldn't see anything. Very unsettling. By 2005, the pattern was clear enough that a Forest Service volunteer named Thomas Brennan began compiling references. Brennan maintained the trail register at the Sheep Canyon trailhead and noticed the recurring theme. He reviewed log entries dating back to 1998 and found that approximately 70% of hikers who mentioned the meadow also mentioned feeling watched. Brennan's informal survey, completed in 2006, documented over 100 entries describing the sensation. The descriptions were consistent: a feeling of being observed from the tree line, a sense of presence, discomfort significant enough to mention in writing. No one reported seeing anything. No movement in the trees. No animals. No people. Just the feeling. Brennan shared his findings with the district ranger, suggesting the meadow might have some psychological effect on visitors, perhaps related to the topography, the enclosed feeling of hill, canyon, or some other environmental factor. The ranger acknowledged the report but took no action. "People feel what they feel," the ranger said, according to Brennan. "If no one's in danger, it's not a Forest Service issue." In 2008, a wildlife biologist named Dr. Patricia Nguyen was conducting research on black bear populations in the Gifford Pinchot. Her work involved deploying motion-activated cameras throughout the forest to monitor bear movement and behavior. Nguyen placed 3 cameras around the Sheep Canyon meadow in June 2008. All 3 cameras malfunctioned within 2 days. Nguyen retrieved the cameras on June 27th. Each showed the same pattern: normal operation for the first 24 to 36 hours, capturing images of deer, small mammals, and occasional hikers. Then, between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. on the second night, the cameras would record a final image and stop functioning. The final images were identical across all 3 cameras: the tree line at the meadow's edge, perfectly focused, well lit by the camera's infrared flash. Nothing visible in the frame. No animals. No movement. Just trees. After that final image, the cameras recorded nothing. The batteries were drained completely despite being fresh when installed. The SD cards showed no corruption, no errors. The cameras simply stopped. Nguyen replaced the cameras, assuming equipment failure. The replacements failed identically. Same timing, same final image, same battery drain. Nguyen's field report, submitted in August 2008, noted the camera failures but attributed them to unknown technical issues, possibly related to environmental conditions. She did not deploy additional cameras in Sheep Canyon. In a 2015 interview, Nguyen was asked about the incident. "I've used those cameras for years," she said, "all over the region. They're reliable. What happened at Sheep Canyon was unusual, but I couldn't explain it. I had other sites to monitor, so I moved on." The phenomenon gained wider attention in 2010 when a hiking blogger named Michael Del Rosso wrote about his experience in the meadow. Del Rosso had read trail log entries mentioning the feeling of being watched and visited. Sheep Canyon specifically to investigate. He spent 3 hours in the meadow on August 14, 2010, taking photographs and documenting his impressions. Del Rosso described the experience in his blog. "The sensation is immediate. The moment you step into the clearing, you feel it, eyes on you, from the trees maybe, but you can't pinpoint where. I walk the perimeter, looking for anything. A reflection, an animal, some explanation. Nothing. The feeling persisted the entire time. When I finally left, it stopped the moment I entered the forest on the far side." Del Rosso's blog post was shared widely on hiking forums and outdoor recreation sites. Over the following months, dozens of hikers commented with their own experiences. The accounts were remarkably consistent. The feeling of being watched began upon entering the meadow. It was strongest at the meadow's center. It ceased upon leaving. Several commenters noted that the sensation seemed to come from multiple directions, not a single point of observation, but distributed around the entire tree line. One hiker wrote, "It felt like standing in an amphitheater with an invisible audience." In 2012, a group of amateur paranormal investigators requested permission from the Forest Service to conduct an overnight study in Sheep Canyon. The request was denied. The Forest Service stated that overnight camping was not permitted in that specific area due to resource protection concerns. When pressed for details, a spokesperson clarified that the meadow was considered sensitive habitat and should not be disturbed. No documentation of sensitive species or habitat designations for Sheep Canyon exists in publicly available Forest Service records. In 2013, a psychology researcher from the University of Washington named Dr. Raymond Okoro became interested in the phenomenon. Okoro specialized in environmental psychology and was curious whether the meadow's topography or acoustics might create a psychological effect. He visited Sheep Canyon in July 2013 with recording equipment and a team of 3 graduate students. The team spent 6 hours in the meadow conducting acoustic tests, measuring sight lines, and documenting environmental conditions. All 4 team members reported feeling watched. Okoro described it as a persistent, low-level sense of scrutiny, not panic-inducing, but definitely present. Okoro's acoustic tests found nothing unusual. The meadow did not produce echoes or unusual sound reflections. Sight lines were open, no obvious concealed vantage points from which someone could observe without being seen. Environmental conditions were typical for the elevation and season. Okoro attempted to deploy 2 trail cameras overnight, positioned to monitor the tree line. Both cameras failed by morning. Same pattern as Nguyen's cameras. Final image showing the tree line, then complete battery drain. Okoro's research proposal, submitted in 2014, sought funding to study the meadow as a case of collective psychological response to environmental stimuli. The proposal was rejected by 2 separate grant committees. One reviewer noted, "The described phenomenon lacks sufficient empirical foundation and appears to be based primarily on anecdotal reports." Okoro did not pursue the research further. In a 2018 email to a colleague, later made public, he wrote, "I've studied environmental psychology for 20 years. I know how terrain and isolation can affect perception. What I felt in that meadow was different. It wasn't my imagination, and I can't explain it." In 2016, a Forest Service trail maintenance crew was assigned to repair erosion damage in Sheep Canyon. The crew, led by a technician named Harold Morales, spent 2 days working in and around the meadow. All 5 crew members mentioned feeling observed. Morales documented the observation in his maintenance report. Crew noted unusual sense of discomfort while working in meadow area. No safety issues. Work completed as scheduled. A follow-up memo from Morales' supervisor, dated August 2016, stated, "Acknowledge crew report. Recommend scheduling future work in Sheep Canyon during daylight hours with full crew present." The memo offered no explanation for the recommendation. Local knowledge of the meadow is limited. The nearest town, Randall, is 12 miles away. Few longtime residents hike in Sheep Canyon. When asked about the area, a retired logger named Frank Delgado, interviewed in 2019, recalled hearing about the meadow from indigenous workers he had known in the 1970s. "They called it the watching place," Delgado said. "Didn't go into detail, just said it wasn't a good spot to linger. I asked why, and one guy told me some places remember being seen. Didn't make sense to me then. Still doesn't." Efforts to verify this account with local tribal historians have been unsuccessful. One elder, speaking off the record in 2020, acknowledged that certain locations were traditionally avoided but declined to specify which locations or why. The meadow remains accessible. The trail sees regular use, especially during summer months. Hikers continue to report the sensation of being watched. Some dismiss it as suggestion, knowing about the reports and therefore expecting to feel something. Others insist the sensation is real, immediate, and undeniable, and the cameras still fail. In 2022, a YouTuber attempting to document the phenomenon for a paranormal series placed 4 cameras around the meadow. All 4 failed within 48 hours. Same pattern, same final image. The tree line, perfectly focused, nothing visible, just the forest, looking back. Somewhere in the archives of multiple research institutions, there are dozens of these images. Different cameras, different years, different positions around the meadow, all showing the same thing. Trees at the edge of a clearing, captured in the moment before the camera stops working. And in every image, if you look long enough, you start to wonder if the focus is quite right. If the shadows between the trees are exactly where they should be. If something in the frame is just slightly different from what a photograph of an empty forest should show. But you can never be sure. And maybe that's the point. The meadow waits, the cameras fail, and hikers keep walking through, feeling eyes they cannot see from a place that refuses to explain itself. Watching, always watching. Some infrastructure fights back. Forest Road 23 runs for 38 miles through the heart of Gifford Pinchot National Forest, connecting the small town of Randall, Washington, to a network of trails and recreational areas on the eastern slopes of the Cascade Range. Constructed in 1958 by the Forest Service to facilitate timber access and fire suppression, the road was built to last, engineered with proper drainage, graded switchbacks, and a gravel base designed to withstand heavy logging trucks and seasonal weather extremes. The road is maintained annually, resurfaced every decade or so as needed. Most sections hold up well, requiring only minor repairs: pothole patching, shoulder grading, culvert cleaning. Standard maintenance for a backcountry forest road, except for one section. A quarter-mile stretch centered on mile marker 47. That section deteriorates faster than it should. Cracks form within months of repaving. The asphalt buckles and crumbles as if subjected to decades of freeze-thaw cycles in a single season. The deterioration follows a pattern, radial cracks spreading from a central point near the mile marker, forming geometric shapes that maintenance crews describe as too regular to be natural. And the road resists repair. Equipment malfunctions, tools jam, workers report exhaustion and frustration disproportionate to the task. The road, they say, does not want to be fixed. The first documented incident occurred in June of 1984. A Forest Service maintenance crew led by Supervisor Gerald Kowalski was assigned to repave a section of Road 23, including the stretch near mile marker 47. The work was routine: remove the old surface, prepare the base, lay new asphalt. The crew had completed similar projects dozens of times. But at mile marker 47, problems began immediately. A jackhammer used to break up old pavement jammed repeatedly, despite being newly serviced. A dump truck's hydraulic lift failed, spilling gravel across the roadbed. A paving machine overheated and shut down, even though ambient temperatures were moderate and the equipment was functioning normally on other sections. Kowalski's incident report, filed on June 28, 1984, noted the equipment failures, but attributed them to coincidental mechanical issues. The section was eventually repaved, though it took 3 times longer than scheduled. By the following spring, the new pavement had failed. Cracks radiated from the center of the section, forming a pattern that Kowalski described in a maintenance log as almost like spokes on a wheel. The Forest Service dispatched a crew to assess the damage. They found the deterioration severe: deep fissures, buckling asphalt, sections crumbling to gravel. The road was repaved again in 1986. It failed again by 1987. Over the next decade, the pattern became undeniable. Mile marker 47 required attention every 11 to 13 months, while the rest of Road 23 remained stable. Maintenance records from 1984 through 1996 document 12 separate repair operations on that quarter-mile section. Crews began to dread assignments involving mile marker 47. A foreman named Thomas Vasquez, who supervised 5 repair projects between 1989 and 1994, described the experience in a 1995 interview with a regional forestry journal. "Every time we go there, something goes wrong," Vasquez said. "Tools break, machines quit, the crew gets irritable. We've had guys refuse to work that section, said it felt wrong, like the ground was pushing back. I thought they were being superstitious. Then I spent a day there myself. They weren't wrong." Vasquez elaborated in the interview. He described a sense of physical resistance when operating equipment on that section, machinery that felt heavier than it should, tools that required more effort to use, asphalt that seemed to harden too quickly or not set properly despite being mixed and applied correctly. "It's like the road doesn't want to be there," Vasquez said. "I know how that sounds. But after you've worked enough road projects, you know what normal feels like. This isn't normal." In 1996, a Forest Service engineer named Dr. Sandra Brennan was assigned to investigate the recurring failures at mile marker 47. Brennan had a background in civil engineering and materials science. She conducted a comprehensive assessment, soil testing, drainage analysis, structural surveys of the roadbed. Her findings, documented in a report completed in August 1996, were inconclusive. The soil beneath the road was stable volcanic material, well drained, and capable of supporting the roadbed. The drainage was adequate. The base layers showed no signs of erosion or subsidence. By every measurable standard, the section should have been stable, yet it wasn't. Brennan noted in her report, "The deterioration pattern is inconsistent with typical failure modes. The radial cracking suggests stress concentration at a central point, but no obvious source of stress is present. The rate of deterioration exceeds what environmental factors alone should produce." Brennan recommended additional monitoring and suggested the possibility of localized subsurface instability that her tests had not detected. She stopped short of calling the situation anomalous, but her report included a handwritten note in the margin. "Crews report unusual resistance during repair work, unable to verify objectively, but worth noting." The Forest Service approved another repaving in 1997. The crew foreman for that project, a man named Michael Nguyen, kept a detailed personal log of the work. His entries, later shared with a journalist researching infrastructure mysteries, paint a picture of mounting frustration. Day 1, jackhammer wouldn't start, replaced fuel line, worked for an hour, then seized. Day 2, asphalt spreader jammed 3 times. Hydraulics sluggish despite full fluid levels. Crew morale low. Day 3, 2 workers called in sick. Remaining crew exhausted. "I don't know why this section is so hard. Everything feels heavier here." Nguyen's final entry, dated July 19, 1997, finished, barely, "I won't take another job on this road. Something is wrong with it." The repaving lasted 9 months. By April of 1998, the familiar cracks had returned. In 1999, the Forest Service contracted an independent engineering firm to assess the problem. The firm, based in Seattle, sent a team to conduct geotechnical surveys using ground-penetrating radar and seismic testing. They found nothing unusual, no voids, no unstable layers, no geological features that would explain the repeated failures. The firm's report, submitted in October 1999, recommended replacing the entire roadbed to a depth of 6 feet, installing reinforced drainage, and using a specialized asphalt mix designed for extreme conditions. The cost estimate was significant, over $100,000 for a quarter-mile section. The Forest Service approved the work. The roadbed was excavated in the summer of 2000, revealing nothing unusual beneath, just layers of gravel and compacted soil, as expected. The new roadbed was constructed with geotech-style reinforcement, upgraded drainage, and high-grade asphalt. It began cracking within 8 months. A maintenance technician named Patricia Okoro, assigned to inspect the section in 2001, documented the failure in photographs and notes. The cracks were identical to previous iterations, radial patterns emanating from a point near mile marker 47. Okoro measured the crack spacing. The angles were consistent, approximately 30 degrees between each radial line, forming a near-perfect geometric pattern. "This isn't random weathering," Okoro wrote in her inspection report. "This is structured damage. Something is causing this pattern, and I don't know what." Okoro requested permission to install monitoring equipment, strain gauges, temperature sensors, vibration detectors, to capture real-time data on the road's behavior. Her request was denied. A memo from the regional office, dated May 2001, stated, "Continuous monitoring is not cost-effective for routine maintenance issues. Continue standard repair protocols." Okoro resigned from the Forest Service later that year. In a letter to a colleague, she wrote, "I can't work for an agency that ignores evidence. That road is doing something roads don't do, and no one wants to admit it." In 2006, a documentary filmmaker named Kevin Del Rosso visited mile marker 47 while researching a series on unexplained infrastructure failures. Del Rosso interviewed several former maintenance workers, including Nguyen and Vasquez. Both reiterated their experiences: equipment failures, physical resistance, a sense that the road fought back against repair efforts. Del Rosso also spoke with a retired geologist named Harold Morales, who had reviewed the soil and geological data from the site. Morales found nothing in the data to explain the deterioration, but noted one curious detail. The geometric pattern of the cracks matched a type of stress pattern typically seen in materials subjected to regular, rhythmic loading, like a bridge experiencing repeated traffic vibrations. "But this is a forest road," Morales said in the interview. "Low traffic, no heavy trucks anymore. There's no source of rhythmic stress. Yet the cracks look exactly like what you'd see if something was vibrating or pulsing the road from below." Del Rosso's documentary included footage of the road, showing the radial crack pattern clearly. The documentary aired on a regional public television station in 2007, but received little attention. The Forest Service continues to maintain Road 23. The section at mile marker 47 is repaved approximately once a year. Maintenance logs document the recurring failures with bureaucratic precision. Dates, costs, materials used. The logs do not mention equipment failures or crew complaints. Those details, if recorded at all, are kept in personal notes and unofficial conversations. In 2018, a crew foreman named Rachel Itkin was assigned to repave mile marker 47. She had not worked on that section before and was unaware of its history. Her report, filed after the job was completed, included a passage that echoes earlier accounts. Difficult project, equipment underperformed, crew fatigue higher than expected. Recommend scheduling extra time for future work on this section. When asked in a follow-up interview if she noticed anything unusual, Itkin hesitated. "It's hard to describe," she said, "but yeah, something felt off, like the ground didn't want us there. I know that sounds ridiculous." The road continues to crack. Every year the geometric pattern returns. Every year crews repave it. And every year the work is harder than it should be. And somewhere in the Forest Service archives, there is a 1996 report with a handwritten note in the margin. A note that was never followed up on. A note that simply says, "It's like the road doesn't want to be fixed." The road curves through the forest, following the contours of the land as all roads do. At mile marker 47, the pavement is smooth, recently repaved, still dark and fresh. But if you look closely, you can see the first hairline cracks beginning to form. Thin lines, barely visible, radiating from a central point. Perfect geometry. Perfect angles. Perfect repetition. The road resists, and no one knows why.